She's just a waitress, he told himself. Nobody's going to miss her if she's gone. But Cole Harrison had heard that exact kind of thinking before, and it had already cost him everything once. The morning that cup of coffee fell, nobody in Silver Creek Diner expected what came next. They expected fury. They expected the kind of reaction that ends up in police reports and local rumors. What they got instead was something none of them would stop talking about for the rest of their lives. If this story moves you, please subscribe to our channel and follow along until the very end. Drop a comment below and tell us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. The coffee hit Cole Harrison's chest before anyone in the diner had time to breathe. It was 7:43 in the morning, and the Silver Creek Diner was running at the particular kind of chaos that only happens when too many people need too many things at the same moment. The breakfast crowd had pushed in hard, that Tuesday truckers, who had been on the road since before sunrise, a family of 5 crammed into the corner booth, with 3 kids who couldn't decide between pancakes and eggs, 2 older ranchers at the counter who had been arguing about irrigations rights for 40 minutes without once lowering their voices. Every table was full. The coffee station had already run its second pot dry. The kitchen bell had been ringing nonstop for 12 minutes, and Madeline Carter was trying to answer her phone while carrying a full tray. She knew the moment she answered that call, she was making a mistake. She had worked at Silver Creek long enough to understand the unwritten rules: 2 hands on the tray, eyes on where you're walking, never split your attention during a rush. She had told herself the same thing at least 100 times while training the newer girls who came through in summer. Eyes forward, both hands, always. But the number on her screen was the hospital. And when the hospital called, Maddie answered. "Miss Carter?" The voice on the other end was professionally calm in a way that made her stomach drop every single time. "This is Riverside General calling about your father, Thomas Carter. The attending physician would like to speak with you at your earliest convenience regarding a change in his treatment plan." A change in his treatment plan. She didn't know exactly what that meant, but she had been hearing variations of that phrase for 11 days, and not once had it meant anything good. "I can call back in 20 minutes, she said quietly, pressing the phone against her shoulder and tilting her tray slightly to compensate for the way her arm had started shaking without her permission. "I'm in the middle of a shift right now, but I can." She didn't see him until the tray tilted too far. Cole Harrison had pushed back from the booth at exactly the wrong moment. He was a large man, broad through the shoulders, barrel-chested, the kind of build that suggested a life spent working with his hands and not apologizing for taking up space. His leather vest was worn to a comfortable softness that only comes from years of use, every patch on it earned through something she didn't know the story of. He had gray threaded through his beard and through the short blonde hair at his temples, and there was a scar above his right eyebrow that curved like a question mark. He wasn't looking at her when he stood. He was reaching for something he had dropped on the floor beside the booth. The full pot of coffee went directly into his chest. The sound it made, the ceramic edge of the pot hitting the wooden edge of the booth. The splash, the sharp collective gasp from every person within 20 feet cut through every other noise in the diner like a blade. The ranchers at the counter stopped mid-sentence. The family in the corner booth went completely silent, the mother pulling her youngest child toward her without thinking. 3 different conversations simply ceased. Maddie stood frozen. The phone was still in her hand. She could hear the hospital representative saying something. "Miss Carter, are you still there?" And she couldn't answer. She couldn't do anything except stare at the man in front of her, at the dark stain spreading across his vest, at the shattered remains of the coffee pot on the floor between them, and understand with terrible clarity that her life had just gotten significantly worse. Cole Harrison straightened slowly. He was very, very still. And everyone in that diner was watching him with the particular held-breath tension of people who are expecting something violent and trying to calculate whether they should move toward the door before it starts. Maddie put the phone in her apron pocket. She didn't remember deciding to do that. Her hands moved on their own, putting the phone away. reaching for the small towel she kept tucked at her waist, stepping forward even though every instinct in her body was screaming at her to step back. "I'm so sorry," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Sir, I am so sorry I wasn't watching where I was going, and let me get you something. Let me—" "Madeline," the voice came from behind her. She closed her eyes for one brief, involuntary moment. Rick Dalton, manager of Silver Creek Diner for 9 years, had a way of saying her name that always felt like a door closing. He was 42 years old and had the lean, watchful energy of a man who believed that problems were always caused by someone specific and that his job was primarily to identify who that someone was. He was good at his job. He had identified her 3 times this month already. She turned around. Rick was standing 6 feet behind her, arms crossed, his expression somewhere between professionally controlled and genuinely furious. He looked from her to the man in the leather vest to the broken coffee pot on the floor, and back to her, and the math he was doing behind his eyes was not difficult to read. "What happened?" he said. It wasn't a question. "It was an accident," Maddie said. I got distracted for a second, and—" "This is the 3rd incident this month," Rick said. He wasn't talking to her anymore. Not really. He was talking to the room, or perhaps to himself, working through the logic of a decision he had clearly been building toward for some time. 3 weeks ago, you dropped an entire order of breakfast plates in the kitchen. Last Thursday, you forgot the Hendersons' order completely, and they sat for 40 minutes without anyone checking on them. And now this. He gestured at Cole Harrison with one short, precise motion. "You spilled coffee on a customer." "I know," Maddie said. "And I'm going to fix it. I need to speak with you after your shift," Rick said. And the way he said it made the meaning perfectly clear. After your shift meant after your last shift. Cole Harrison had not moved. He was still standing there, watching this exchange, with an expression that was difficult to read, not angry. Exactly. But very focused. Like a man who was paying extremely close attention to something most people would have already dismissed. "It was an accident," said a voice from the booth behind Cole. Everyone turned. A man Maddie hadn't noticed before, one of the other riders, a heavy-set man with a thick black beard and forearms covered in faded tattoos, was leaning back in his seat with his coffee cup in his hand and a very flat look directed at Rick Dalton. "His name patch," said Boomer. He looked like a man who had survived enough situations to have lost patience with unnecessary ones. "She said it was an accident," Boomer repeated. "You hard of hearing, or are you just looking for a reason?" Rick's jaw tightened. He was not, Maddie suspected, accustomed to being questioned in his own diner. "Sir, I understand you're a customer here, and I appreciate she apologized, said another rider from the far end of the cluster of booths they had claimed. He was younger than the others, maybe early 30s, with close-cropped hair and a quiet manner that somehow made his interjection feel more pointed rather than less. "Girl apologized. Man's vest is already wet. What exactly are you solving right now?" Rick looked like he was considering several different responses and couldn't choose between them. Cole Harrison picked up the coffee mug from the table beside him, still full, apparently having escaped the spill, and took a slow drink. Then he set it down and looked at Rick with an expression that was perfectly, deliberately calm. "I think," Cole said, his voice low and measured, the kind of voice that doesn't need volume to carry weight, "you should let her finish her shift." Rick opened his mouth. "That wasn't a suggestion," Cole added. The silence that followed was the specific kind that happens when a room collectively realizes that the balance of power has just shifted and no one is entirely sure how to proceed. Rick looked at Cole. Cole looked back at him. After a moment that stretched considerably longer than was comfortable, Rick nodded once tightly. "Of course," he said. "Madeline, finish your tables. We'll talk later." He turned and walked back toward the kitchen, and the precise angle of his shoulders communicated that this conversation was not over, merely relocated. Maddie let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. She crouched down and started picking up the larger pieces of the broken coffee pot, stacking them carefully in her hand. Her fingers were shaking. She could see the tremor in them, a fine, rapid vibration that she couldn't seem to stop no matter how hard she pressed her palms together. Cole crouched down across from her. She looked up, startled. He was picking up pieces of broken ceramic from his side of the mess, placing them in a neat pile at the edge of the floor, calm as if this was something he did every morning. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said. They collected the broken pieces in silence for a moment. The diner around them had begun to find its rhythm again. Conversations resuming at a lower register than before. People returning to their plates with the slightly dazed quality of witnesses to something unexpected. When Cole stood up, he held out his hand for the pieces she had collected. She placed them in his palm, and he set the whole pile on the edge of the booth table. "Thank you," she said. "And I'm truly sorry about your vest. I can pay for the cleaning, or if it's ruined, What did the hospital want?" She stopped. She stared at him. "I heard you on the phone," he said. Not unkindly. Just simply. "Before the accident, you were talking to a hospital." Matt pressed her lips together. The professional answer, the answer she had been giving for 11 days to every customer who noticed she looked tired, to every coworker who asked if she was okay, to her landlord when he called about the late payment, was automatic and ready. "Everything's fine. Just a family thing. Nothing serious. I'm fine." She opened her mouth to say it. What came out instead was, "My dad." She heard herself say it, and something shifted behind her sternum, a small, structural crack in something she had been holding rigid for weeks. "He had a heart attack 11 days ago," she continued, and her voice was doing something she couldn't control, mostly level, but with a roughness underneath it. The way a road sounds right before the pavement ends. "They thought he was stable, but they keep they keep changing things. The treatment plan, the medications. There's a specialist now who wants to try something different, and I don't really understand all of it. I just know it costs more, and I'm trying to figure out how to." She stopped herself. She looked at the man in front of her, this large, scarred, leather-vested stranger who had walked into her diner 20 minutes ago as the most intimidating person in the room, and she said, "I'm sorry. You don't need to hear all of that. Let me get you something for your vest." Cole was looking at her with an expression she couldn't identify. It wasn't pity. She would have recognized pity and bristled at it immediately. This was something different, something more attentive, more deliberate, like a man who has learned from experience to look very carefully at things other people look past. "How old's your dad?" he asked. 61. "You have siblings?" "A younger brother. He's 17. He lives with me." She paused. "Our mom left when Danny was 6. Cole nodded slowly. He reached up and touched the collar of his vest, rubbing the wet fabric between his fingers briefly, and then he looked back at her. "How long have you been working doubles?" The question landed precisely because of how specific it was. Not "Are you tired?" or "Are you okay?" Those questions she could deflect. This one required an actual answer. 8 days, she said. "Since my dad went in. I pick up the lunch shift, work through to close. Danny's at school during the day, so that's manageable." "It's manageable." She said, "Manageable the way people say words they have been repeating to themselves until the meaning wears thin." "It's manageable," she said again. Cole didn't nod. He just looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted slightly, not softer, exactly, but more open, like a door that had been closed swinging very slowly inward. "Sit down for a second," he said. "I can't. I have tables." "Your tables will be there in 2 minutes," he said it simply, without argument, the way someone states a fact they have no reason to embellish. "Sit down." She sat. She didn't know why she did it. She had 12 tables, a manager who was already building a case against her, and a phone in her pocket that might ring with the hospital again at any moment. There was no logical reason to sit down in the booth of a man she had just spilled coffee on, across from 6 motorcycle riders who were watching this entire exchange with varying degrees of curiosity. But she sat down, and the moment she did, she realized she had forgotten what it felt like. She had been on her feet for so many consecutive hours, across so many consecutive days, that the simple act of sitting in a booth felt like something her body, received as an almost physical relief, a loosening in her shoulders she hadn't known was there. A small release of pressure behind her eyes. She put her hands flat on the table and watched them shake. She looked at them like they belonged to someone else. "I don't usually do that," she said. The shaking. "It started last week. I think it's just I'm not sleeping very well." "How much are you sleeping?" "Enough." "That's not what I asked." She almost smiled. It surprised her, the almost smile. She hadn't come close to one in days. 3 hours maybe, she said. Sometimes 4. "I lay down when Danny goes to sleep, and then I wake up around 2 and I can't get back." She shook her head. "My brain won't stop running numbers. Hospital bills, rent, Danny's school expenses. My car needs a repair I haven't been able to afford for a month. I just keep adding things up and the math never works out." She said it all quickly, the way you say things when the seal finally breaks, not with drama or performance, but with the flat, exhausted directness of someone who has been carrying weight alone for so long that the muscles are simply giving out. From across the table, one of the other riders, the older one, with white hair and a beard to match, his name patch reading silver in faded thread, leaned slightly forward and said quietly, "Does your dad know how bad it is? The money situation?" "No," Maddie said immediately. "He can't. He's recovering. Stress is the last thing he needs right now. The doctor said his heart is already under enough strain. He thinks I'm managing fine." She paused. "I tell him I'm managing fine, and the boy?" "Your brother. Danny knows something is wrong. He's 17. He's not stupid. But he doesn't know the specifics." She looked down at her hands again, at the shaking that wouldn't stop. "He already offered to get a job. Drop some of his after-school activities." I told him absolutely not. He's a good student. He's got a real shot at a scholarship next year if his grades hold. I'm not letting him give that up because I can't." She stopped, swallowed. "Because of circumstances." The table was very quiet. The diner continued its noise, around them plates and silverware, someone's radio from the kitchen, a child crying briefly in the corner booth before being soothed, but at this particular collection of booths, there was a stillness that felt held rather than empty. Boomer, the heavy-set man with the tattoos, was looking at the surface of the table with his jaw set. Silver had his coffee cup in both hands and was staring into it. The younger rider, the one who had spoken earlier, had his arms crossed and his eyes on Maddie with an expression she recognized. The expression of someone who is trying to figure out what to do. Cole Harrison had not moved. He was still looking at her with that same careful, deliberate attention, and she realized with a small shock that he was the least uncomfortable person at the table. He wasn't fidgeting or avoiding her eyes or searching for the right thing to say. He was just present completely, self-consciously present in a way that she could not immediately explain. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Go ahead. Why are you still sitting here?" She gestured slightly at the wet vest, at the table, at the situation in general. "You could have left 20 minutes ago. Most people would have left 20 minutes ago. I ruined your vest. Your manager," she stopped and corrected herself. "The manager tried to fire me in front of you. And you're still here asking me about my father and my sleep schedule. Why?" Cole was quiet for a moment. He looked down at the table, and something moved across his face, brief, controlled, but real. Then he looked back up at her. "My sister used to work doubles," he said. The way he said it past tense, uncomplicated, allowing itself to carry weight, made the air in the booth shift slightly. Maddie waited. "Her name was Emily," Cole continued. "She was 6 years younger than me. After her husband got sick kidney disease, 3 years of it, she worked whatever she could get. 2 jobs sometimes. Kept telling everyone she was fine. Kept saying she was managing. Kept running the numbers at 2 in the morning, just like you're doing." He paused. "Nobody pushed hard enough to ask what was actually happening. Including me. I should have pushed. I didn't." He stopped there. The sentence was finished, but the space after it held the shape of what he wasn't saying. "What happened to her?" Maddie asked. "She fell asleep at the wheel," Cole said. "Coming home from a closing shift. 2 in the morning. Road was empty, which was the only reason nobody else was hurt." He picked up his coffee mug, looked at it for a moment, and set it down without drinking. She'd been awake for 21 hours. We found out later her heart was already showing strain from the stress. Nobody knew because she hadn't been to a doctor in 2 years. Couldn't afford the copay. The booth was absolutely silent. Maddie felt something shift in the center of her chest, a slow, heavy rearrangement of things she had been keeping in very specific positions. "I'm so sorry," she said. It came out barely above a whisper. "The point," Cole said, not harshly, but with a precision that was clearly practiced, clearly something he had decided to say before he let himself feel the part that made it hard to say, is that she didn't have to go through it the way she did. There were people around her who could have helped if they'd known, if they'd asked, if they'd stopped accepting fine as an answer. He looked at Maddie steadily. "You're not fine." "No," she admitted. "I'm not fine. I know. I've been saying I am." "I know that too," she laughed a short, surprised sound, completely involuntary, the kind of laugh that comes out when you have been holding something too long and the grip finally slips. It startled her. It seemed to surprise the table as well, though not unpleasantly. "You've known me for 15 minutes, she said. "Sometimes 15 minutes is enough," Cole said. From somewhere behind her, she heard Rick Dalton's voice, not directed at her, but close enough to remind her that he was still in the building, still watching, still building toward whatever conclusion he had been building toward before Cole had stopped him. She started to stand. "Wait," Cole said. She paused. He reached into his vest and pulled out his wallet. She immediately understood what he was about to do, and she felt her spine straighten. "No," she said. "Absolutely not. I haven't done anything yet. I know what you're about to do, and the answer is no. I appreciate it. I genuinely appreciate it, but I don't take money from strangers. I don't take charity. I'm not." She caught herself, aware that she was speaking faster than she meant to. "I'm not that person. I can handle my own situation. I just need time to figure it out." Cole looked at her. The wallet stayed in his hand, unopened. "What if it wasn't charity?" he said. "It's..." She stopped. "What do you mean?" "You gave me something," he said. "You sat down and you talked to me honestly, for the first time anyone has in I don't know how long. People see the vest, they see the club, and they decide what we are before we open our mouths. You didn't do that, or if you did, you sat down anyway." He paused. "That's worth something." She looked at him for a long moment. "That's a very creative way to give someone money they didn't earn," she said. "Maybe," Cole said. "But it's also true." The wallet was still in his hand. Boomer was watching her with an expression that was harder to read now, something underneath the gruffness, something almost careful. Silver had set down his coffee cup and was looking at the table. The younger rider had turned slightly away, which she somehow understood was a kind of privacy, a way of giving the moment space. Maddie looked down at her hands. They were still shaking. She thought about Danny, studying at the kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night, pretending not to hear when she came home exhausted and sat down on the couch and stayed there for 20 minutes before she could make herself get up and make dinner. She thought about her father in the hospital bed, smiling when she came to visit, telling her she looked good, and she had been lying to his face every time. She thought about the number on her bank account that she checked every morning before she got dressed, like pressing on a bruise to measure whether it had gotten worse. She thought about how tired she was, how genuinely, bone-deeply tired. "He says it's not charity," Boomer said from across the table. Still not looking at her, his voice flat and directed at the tabletop. "He's not a liar. I've known the man for 22 years. He's a lot of things. He's not a liar." Cole said nothing. He was still holding the wallet, waiting, not pressuring, not leaning forward, not making his expression more persuasive, not doing any of the things people do when they want you to say yes. Just holding steady, the way someone holds a door open and then stands back and waits without comment to see whether you walk through it. Maddie looked at the wallet. She looked at Cole. She looked at her hands. "Okay," she said. The word came out small and a little rough, like something that had been stuck somewhere and finally came loose. "Okay." Cole nodded once. He opened the wallet, and Maddie sat back in the booth and let the shaking in her hands continue. because she finally understood that she finally in something she needed to hide. Not here. Not from these people. Not in this particular booth on this particular Tuesday morning, when everything she had been carrying alone finally, for the first time in 11 days, had somewhere else to rest for a moment. From the kitchen, the bell rang again. From the corner booth, the youngest child had stopped crying. From somewhere outside, the sound of more motorcycles could be heard, pulling into the parking lot, not threatening, not alarming, just the sound of people arriving. And Madeline Carter, 24 years old, blonde-haired, 3-hour-a-night, 2-job, holding everything together with both hands, sat in a booth at Silver Creek Diner and really breathed for the first time since the hospital called 11 days ago, and her whole world began running a direction she hadn't chosen. She didn't know yet what was coming. She didn't know about the conversation Cole was going to have with Rick Dalton before he left that morning, or what Rick was going to say when he came to find her an hour later, or what would be sitting in her apron pocket at the end of her shift when she finally unfolded the bills and saw how many there were and had to sit down on the floor of the diner bathroom and cry with her back against the wall for 4 minutes before she could make herself stand back up. She didn't know any of that yet. All she knew in that moment was that someone had looked at her, not past her, not through her, not at the uniform or the tray or the mistake she had just made, but at her, directly, and had refused to accept fine as the final answer. And for the first time in 11 days, she didn't feel like she was drowning alone. She felt like someone had noticed the water. Rick Dalton came back out of the kitchen 11 minutes later. Maddie knew it was 11 minutes because she had been watching the clock above the coffee station the entire time, not because she was anxious. Exactly, but because she had learned over the past 11 days that time was the one thing she could track when everything else felt like it was sliding. She had finished clearing the broken ceramic from the floor, refilled 3 tables, apologized to the couple in booth 7 for the wait, and was in the middle of topping off the rancher's coffee at the counter when she heard Rick's footsteps behind her, that particular rhythm. Slightly too deliberate, the walk of a man who has made a decision and is coming to deliver it. She kept pouring the coffee. "Madeline," Rick said. A word, 1 second. She finished the pour, set the carafe down, smiled at the rancher. Nearest her, a quiet man named Gerald, who had been coming in every Tuesday morning for 4 years and always ordered the same thing and never once complained about anything, and then she turned around. Rick was standing at the edge of the counter with his arms crossed and his expression locked into something she recognized. The particular blankness of a man who has rehearsed what he's about to say and doesn't want any part of his face giving away that he's nervous about it. "I need to speak with you about this morning," he said. "I know," Maddie said, "and I want to explain what happened." "I don't need an explanation," Rick said. "What I need is consistency. What I need is reliability. What I need is..." "What's the girl's name?" Both of them turned. Cole Harrison was at the counter now, not dramatically, not with any particular force, just standing there the way large, unhurried men stand, which is to say, as if they have never once in their lives felt the need to justify taking up space. He had his coffee mug in his hand and was looking at Rick with the same focused, deliberate expression he had directed at Maddie earlier, except that on Rick, the effect was considerably more uncomfortable. Rick blinked. "I beg your pardon," her name, Cole said. "I heard you call her Madeline. Is that what you call her? Madeline? Or does she go by something else?" Rick looked briefly between Cole and Maddie with the expression of a man trying to determine whether this was relevant. "Her name is Madeline Carter, our waitress." "Your waitress," Cole repeated. He didn't make it a question. He just repeated it back, flat, and let it sit in the air between them. Rick's jaw moved slightly. "Mr." He paused, clearly not knowing Cole's name, clearly not wanting to admit that. "Harrison," Cole said. "Mr. Harrison, I appreciate that you're a customer, and I want your experience here to be a positive one. But what happens with my staff is an internal matter, and I'd ask you to..." "How long has she been working here?" Cole asked. "That's not how long." Rick drew a breath through his nose. 4 years, he said. 4 years. Cole set his coffee mug on the counter. And in 4 years, has she given you problems? That's not, has she something shifted in Rick's posture? Not a collapse, more like a very small adjustment. The way a structure shifts when one load-bearing element changes its position. No, Rick said, not until recently. Not until recently, Cole said. And recently, how recently are we talking? Rick looked at Maddie. Maddie said nothing. She was watching this exchange with the held-breath attention of someone watching a car navigate black ice, not sure whether to intervene. Not sure whether intervening would make it worse. The last 3 weeks, Rick said. 2 or 3 weeks. Cole picked up his coffee mug again. You know anything about what's been happening with her in the last 2 or 3 weeks? Silence. Rick did not answer immediately, and the pause itself was an answer. Her father, Cole said, and the gentleness with which he said it was, paradoxically, the sharpest thing in the conversation. Not angry, just precise. Just saying the thing that needed to be said, clearly enough that there was no ambiguity about whether it had been said. She's been working doubles for 8 days to cover hospital bills. She's sleeping 3 hours a night. She's raising her 17-year-old brother on her own while managing all of it. He paused. That's what recently looks like for Madeline Carter. The diner had gone quiet again. Not the dramatic silence from earlier. This was softer, more gradual. The way a room gets quiet when something private becomes public and everyone around it instinctively understands they are witnessing something that matters. Gerald at the counter had stopped stirring his coffee. The younger rider from Cole's group, the one Maddie had mentally started calling quiet, because he said the least but always seemed to be tracking everything, was watching from his booth with his arms folded and his expression unreadable. Rick Dalton was looking at the counter. He was a precise man, a numbers man, a man who had built his professional identity around his ability to assess situations quickly and respond efficiently. And right now, he looked like a man who had run an assessment and received a result he didn't know how to file. I wasn't aware of the details, he said. His voice was quieter than before. She didn't say anything. She didn't say anything because she's been trying to keep her job, Cole said, which is the same thing my sister did, which didn't go well. He picked up his coffee mug. I'd suggest you have a different conversation with her than the one you came out here to have. He walked back to his booth. That was all. He walked back to his booth, sat down, picked up the laminated menu even though he had clearly already ordered, and looked at it as though the last 5 minutes had been entirely unremarkable. Maddie stood at the counter and waited. Rick stood across from her and did not speak for what felt like a very long time. He's right, Rick finally said. He said it like it cost him something. You should have told me. I didn't think it was relevant to my job performance, Maddie said. She wasn't being combative, she genuinely meant it. She had always kept the two tracks separate in her mind, the work track and the falling apart track, and she had believed, fiercely and perhaps naively, that as long as she kept them separate enough, neither would contaminate the other. It's relevant, Rick said. It's Maddie. He stopped. He had not called her Maddie in 4 years. It startled both of them slightly. Take your break. Full break. 30 minutes. She stared at him. Your tables are covered, he said. Janie's in. Take 30 minutes and call the hospital back. She opened her mouth to say she was fine, the automatic response. The phrase she had worn smooth with overuse, and stopped herself. Okay, she said instead. She took off her apron and walked to the back booth near the fire exit, the one nobody ever used, because the bench was broken on one side and the light above it flickered constantly. She sat on the good side and pulled out her phone and called the hospital back. And while she waited on hold, she pressed her forehead against the cool wall beside the booth and breathed in the specific way that had started last week, slowly, counting the way she'd seen it in a video someone had posted about panic attacks, which she was fairly certain she was not having, but which she was also fairly certain was adjacent to what was happening to her body at regular intervals. The doctor's assistant picked up after 4 minutes. The news was not catastrophic. That was how Maddie had started measuring medical updates, on a scale from not catastrophic to devastating. Today was not catastrophic. Her father's cardiologist wanted to add a medication that had shown good results in patients with his specific condition, but it required prior authorization from the insurance company, which could take 7 to 10 business days, which meant her father would be in the hospital for at least another week, which meant the bills were going to increase by an amount that she could already feel pressing against the back of her throat like something physical. "Okay," she said to the assistant. "Okay, thank you. Is there anything I can do to speed up the authorization?" "You could contact the insurance company directly," the assistant said. "Sometimes a call from the patient or family member helps move things along." "I'll call them today," Maddie said. "What's the number?" She wrote it on the back of a receipt she found in her pocket, in the small, tight handwriting she'd developed over the past week for fitting more information onto smaller pieces of paper. She thanked the assistant. She hung up. She looked at the receipt for a moment, and then she folded it carefully and put it in the front pocket of her apron. Then she sat very still for 2 minutes. She wasn't doing anything. She wasn't thinking, wasn't planning, wasn't running numbers. She was just sitting in the broken booth, under the flickering light, being completely still, which she had not done in 8 days. She didn't know someone was nearby until she heard the sound of a coffee cup being set on the table. She looked up. Boomer, the heavyset rider with the tattoos, was standing at the end of the booth with 2 cups of fresh coffee, one in each hand. He looked at her expression and raised both cups slightly, the universal gesture of offering. "You mind?" he said. She gestured at the seat across from her. He sat down. He set one cup in front of her and kept the other for himself and didn't say anything for a moment. "Good news or bad news?" he asked finally. "Medium news," she said. He nodded, as if medium news was a perfectly legitimate category, which she appreciated. "Medium is workable," he said. "Usually," she said. He drank his coffee. She drank hers. The light above them flickered twice and held. "How long have you known Cole?" she asked. 22 years, Boomer said. "Give or take. I was 28 when I met him. We were both working a job in Wyoming construction. Nothing interesting. He was already in the club by then. I wasn't." He paused. "He's the reason I eventually was." "What kind of person is he?" she asked. "I mean, actually. Not the reputation. What is he actually like?" Boomer turned the coffee cup slowly in his hands, considering. He had the manner of a man who thinks before he speaks, not because he's unsure of himself, but because he believes that words are worth thinking about. "He shows up," Boomer said finally. "That's the main thing. You call him at 2 in the morning, he shows up. You're in over your head, he shows up. You think you're handling something saying fine and you're actually not. He sees it before you do, and then he shows up." He set the cup down. "He's been like that as long as I've known him. Before Emily died and after. The after's different, but the showing up is the same." The name landed with the weight it carried. "She was really important to him," Maddie said. "She was the best person in his life," Boomer said. It was simple and direct and completely without sentimentality, just fact. "And he knows if he'd shown up sooner, she might still be here. He knows it. He doesn't talk about it much, but he knows it. Which is why," he gestured vaguely in the direction of the main seating area, "when he sees something that looks familiar, he doesn't walk past it." Maddie wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "I'm not her," she said, not defensively, carefully. I'm not going to end up the same way. I'm being careful." "She said that too," Boomer said, not harshly. "Just the way you say the thing that needs to be said." Maddie was quiet. "She said she was careful," Boomer continued. "She said she had it under control. She said she knew her limits." He shook his head. "Smart, capable woman. Said all the right things. And she was exhausted to the bone every single day, and nobody pushed past the words to check if the words were true." He looked at Maddie. "You're shaking." She looked down at her hands. They were still doing it, the fine, invisible vibration she couldn't turn off. She had started hiding them in her apron pockets when she was at the tables, pressing them flat against surfaces when she thought nobody was watching. "It started last week," she said. "You see a doctor?" "I don't have time. That's what she—" He stopped, caught himself, let out a slow breath. "Okay, I'm not going to keep making that comparison. You're not her." I know you're not her." He was quiet for a moment. "But you're also not fine. And I'd rather say that to you now than not say it and regret it later. That's all." Something about the plainness of it reached her in a way that more elaborate concern might not have. "Thank you," she said, "for saying it straight." "Cole raised me right," Boomer said dryly. And something in the delivery, the deadpan self-deprecation of it, made her laugh again. The same surprised, involuntary sound from earlier. He smiled at his coffee cup, not broadly, just a small shift at the corner of his mouth. She finished her coffee and went back to work. The lunch rush was starting to layer itself onto the tail end of breakfast, the way it always did on Tuesdays when the road crews from the highway project came in all at once. She moved through her tables with the automatic efficiency of someone who has done something so many times it no longer requires full consciousness refilling, taking orders, delivering plates, clearing, resetting. She had learned, sometime in the last week, that this particular automation was a form of survival. If her body knew the job well enough to do it on its own, she could spend the mental energy elsewhere, on the bills, on Danny, on the insurance number in her pocket. She passed Cole's table 3 times in the next 40 minutes without stopping. On the 4th pass, he said her name, Maddie. She stopped, turned. He was alone at the booth now. The others had spread out, a few at the counter, Boomer back at his original seat, Silver standing near the door, talking to someone he seemed to know. Cole had a piece of paper in front of him that looked like the back of a placemat, and he had written something on it. "Sit down for 1 second," he said. "I really can't," he said, literally. "Sit down for 1 second and then go." She sat. He slid the piece of paper across the table. It had a name on it, a name she didn't recognize, and a phone number, and below that, in Cole's large, slightly irregular handwriting, 2 words, "Insurance Advocate." She looked up at him. "He's a friend," Cole said. "Knows how the insurance system works. He's helped people cut authorization time from 10 days to 2, sometimes less. He doesn't charge for this kind of thing." He paused. "Call him today if you can. Tell him Cole sent you." Maddie stared at the paper. "Why do you have an insurance advocate's number in your head?" she asked. "Because I needed one once," Cole said. "And by the time someone told me about it, it was too late to matter." He nodded at the paper. "It might not help, but it might. Worth a call." She folded the paper very carefully, with the same precise small folds she'd been using all week for important things, and put it in her front pocket next to the hospital receipt. "Cole," she said. He looked at her. "Thank you," she said, "for all of this, for not walking out, for stopping Rick, for the," she gestured slightly, struggling for the right word, "for the last 40 minutes of her life. For all of this." "Don't thank me yet," he said. Something in his tone made her still. "What does that mean?" He looked at her for a moment with that careful, deliberate attention, and she had the sudden, unnerving impression that he was about to tell her something she wasn't ready to hear. "How bad is it?" he said. "The money, specifically." "Not generally specifically." "What are you actually looking at?" She hesitated. She had not told anyone the specific numbers. Not Danny, not her coworkers, not even her closest friend from high school, who still texted every few days to check in. The numbers were the things she kept most tightly locked, because once she said them out loud, they became real in a way. They were harder to push through. Cole waited. He was very good at waiting. "The hospitalization bill so far is around $14,000, she said. She said it the way you pull a bandage off quickly, all at once, because slow is worse. "My insurance covers 60% of inpatient care after the deductible, which I haven't met yet, so I'm probably looking at 7,000 out-of-pocket minimum. The new medication, if they approve it, adds another $300 a month. That's not covered. My car repair is about $800. Rent is due in 11 days. I'm 2 weeks behind on my credit card." She stopped. "And Danny needs new shoes. I know that sounds ridiculous in the middle of everything else. But he needs new shoes. He's been wearing the same pair since September, and the sole is coming apart, and he tried to tape it, and he didn't tell me, but I saw it." And she stopped again. She pressed her lips together. "And the shoes are the thing you cried about," Cole said. Last Tuesday, she admitted, in the car before I came in. For 6 minutes. She exhaled, which was probably not very efficient use of my time. Cole looked at her for a long time. She waited for him to say something reassuring. Something about how it would work out, how she was strong, how these things as always resolve themselves somehow. She was prepared for that. She had been receiving that kind of statement for 11 days and had become quite skilled at receiving it gracefully and meaning it when she thanked people for it. Instead, he said, "What size does he wear?" She blinked. "What? Your brother. What size shoe?" "I 10.5. "Why?" Cole pulled out his phone. Maddie watched him type something. She couldn't see the screen. He put the phone back in his pocket and looked at her with the expression of someone who has completed a task and moved on. "Cole," she said carefully, "what did you just do?" "Ordered shoes," he said. "They'll be at the diner by Thursday. Boomer's cousin runs a supply outfit out of Billings. Good work boots, not fancy, but they hold up." She stared at him. "You can't," she started. "I already did," he said. "So that one's handled." He said it the way you might say, "I already filed that paperwork, efficient, practical. Done now. The insurance advocate. Call him today." He slid the folded placement paper toward her again, even though she already had it. "And the rest, we're going to talk about the rest." "We," Maddie said. "We are?" "Yes, Cole. I don't even know you. You know me better than you knew me 2 hours ago," he said. "And I know you better than anyone in this building does right now, including people you've worked with for 4 years." He paused. "That's not nothing." She thought about Boomer in the broken booth. She thought about Silver's coffee cup held in both hands. She thought about the younger Ryder looking away to give her privacy. She thought about Cole asking Rick Dalton to say her name. "Who are you people?" she said. It came out softer than she meant it to. "People who've learned what it costs to not pay attention," Cole said. "That's all." Before she could respond, the bell above the diner door rang. A woman walked in. She was somewhere in her mid-40s, brisk, carrying a laptop bag and a phone that was already in her hand. She scanned the room quickly, efficiently, the way people do when they're looking for something specific, and her eyes landed on Cole's booth. She walked over. "You called," she said to Cole, not as a greeting exactly, more as a statement of logistics. "I called," Cole confirmed. The woman looked at Maddie. "You're Madeline Carter," she said. Maddie looked between the woman and Cole. Yes. "Who are?" "Patricia Walsh," the woman said, sitting down across from them without being invited, placing her laptop bag on the table and opening the laptop as she did so, all in one fluid motion that suggested she had very little time and intended to use all of it. "I'm a patient advocate. I work with families navigating hospital billing and insurance disputes." She paused. "Cole called me 20 minutes ago." Maddie turned to Cole. Cole was reading the menu again. "You called her," Maddie said. "I texted," Cole said. "She prefers texts. She's faster that way." "While I was on my break," Maddie said. "You were on hold with the hospital," Cole said. "I had time." Patricia had her laptop open and her reading glasses on and was already typing. "I'm going to need the name of your father's insurance provider, the policy number if you have it, the admitting physician's name, and the specific medication they're trying to authorize," she said without looking up. "Do you have any of that with you?" Maddie reached into her apron pocket. She pulled out the folded receipt, the one she'd written on during the hospital call, and unfolded it on the table. She had all of it, because she always had all of it. Every number, every name, every policy detail memorized and documented and ready. Because that was the other thing she had been doing for 11 days. Being completely and exhaustively prepared at all times, because preparedness was the only form of control she had left. Patricia looked at the receipt. Then she looked up at Maddie over her glasses. "You wrote all this down in the last hour," she said. "I've had it memorized for a week," Maddie said. The receipt was just the most recent paper. Patricia was quiet for a half second. Then she looked at Cole. "I like her," Patricia said. "I know," Cole said. "That's why I called you." Maddie sat at the edge of a booth in the middle of her work shift, across from a patient advocate who was already on the phone with her father's insurance company. Watching the woman navigate an automated menu with the practiced precision of someone who has done this 1,000 times. And she had the strange, slightly vertiginous feeling of watching something happen that she had not made happen, something real and concrete, and moving in a direction she had not been able to move on her own. Rick Dalton passed the table twice. The first time, he glanced at the laptop and kept walking. The second time, he stopped. Is everything he started? Insurance advocacy, Patricia said, without looking up. Your employee's father has a prior authorization hold that's been sitting untouched for 3 days. I'm going to fix it. She looked up briefly. Would you like to be useful? Her break was supposed to be 30 minutes. It's been 47. If you could cover her tables for another 15, that would be helpful. Rick opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Maddie, looked at Cole. Cole looked at the menu. Okay, Rick said, and walked away. Boomer, from the counter, made a sound that was almost certainly a laugh, contained to the last possible moment. Silver, near the door, shook his head, slowly, the way a man shakes his head when something is funny, and he's trying to maintain plausible deniability about finding it funny. The younger writer, Maddie, finally saw his name patch clearly, which read Trace was looking out the window with his arms crossed, and a small, very controlled smile at the corner of his mouth. And Maddie Carter sat at the edge of the booth and felt something she hadn't felt in 11 days, something she almost didn't recognize, because it had been absent long enough to become unfamiliar. It was not relief exactly. Relief came after a problem was solved. This was something that came before the feeling of a knot loosening slightly, of tension releasing a fraction, of the structure of a too heavy burden shifting its weight onto another set of hands. It was the feeling of not being alone in something. It was the feeling of someone having shown up. Her hands were still shaking, but the shaking felt different now. It felt like the tremor of something releasing rather than something breaking. Patricia got off the phone 18 minutes later. She pulled her glasses off, folded them, set them on the keyboard, and looked at Maddie. The authorization will be processed by end of business Friday, she said. I spoke to a supervisor, not a representative. The hold was a coding error on the hospital's submission, a preventable, completely fixable mistake that was going to cost your family 10 days and potentially another week of inpatient billing. She paused. It's fixed. Maddie stared at her. Friday, she said. End of business, Patricia confirmed. Your father can potentially begin the new medication by Saturday if the cardiologist orders it immediately, which I'd encourage you to request. The numbers rearranged themselves in Maddie's head, not gone, not solved, but different. Different in the way of a week's worth of daily hospital charges removed from the total. Different in the way of a medication starting sooner. Working sooner, her father potentially going home sooner. Different in the way of something that had been a fixed, immovable cost suddenly having shifted. How much she started. I don't charge families, Patricia said. She was already closing the laptop. I charge hospitals and insurance companies for consultation when they hire me. When I do this, I do it because Cole asked me to, and because this is the kind of thing that should never cost a family money on top of what they're already paying. She stood, picked up her bag, looked at Maddie. Get some sleep when you can, and call your father tonight. He can probably tell something's wrong, which means he's worrying, which means his heart is working harder than it should. She paused. I have a daughter about your age. I would want someone to do this for her. She left. The door swung closed behind her. Maddie sat very still. Then she turned to Cole. He had put the menu down. He was watching her with an expression she finally recognized, not because she'd seen it before, but because she understood it now. It was the expression of someone who has done the thing they could do, which is not the same as fixing everything, which is not the same as making it okay, but is the specific and real and meaningful thing of reaching into the weight a person is carrying and taking one piece of it and saying, this part is handled. This piece isn't yours anymore. You don't have to carry this one. Why? She said. Cole, you've known me for 2 hours. Hour and 40 minutes, he said. Why? He looked at her for a long moment. Because someone should have, he said. For Emily. Someone should have walked in on a Tuesday morning and noticed and made a call and bought the shoes. His voice was even, carefully even, the evenness of a man who has had years to practice saying hard things without unraveling. I can't go back and do that. I can't fix that. But I can be the person who does it now, for someone else when I see it. He paused, so that's what I do. When I see it. The diner hummed and clanked around them. The lunch rush was fully in now, louder, faster, the kitchen bell ringing at intervals. Maddie nodded. She couldn't speak. She was fully aware that if she tried to speak at that precise moment, she would lose the careful control she had maintained in front of strangers for 11 consecutive days, and she was not quite ready to lose it yet, not in the middle of a shift, not here, so she just nodded. Cole nodded back. Go do your tables, he said. You've got a job to keep. She stood, straightened her apron, tucked the folded placemat paper and the hospital folder receipt back into her pocket. Next to each other, two documents that an hour ago had felt like the weight of something impossible and now felt like something else, like a map. Maybe, like evidence that something had changed. She went back to her tables. Rick had covered two of them, imperfectly, in the way of a manager who doesn't quite remember how to wait tables, but is genuinely trying. The couple in booth 4 looked mildly confused. The road crew at the long table in the back needed coffee. She covered it all. She moved fast and smiled and said the right things, and her hands were still shaking. But now there was something underneath the shaking, a steadiness deeper than the tremor, a bedrock that the shaking was resting on rather than replacing. She didn't know at that point that the day was not over. She didn't know that within the next hour, the diner would grow very quiet again, not from fear this time, but from something else entirely. Something she would remember for the rest of her life. Something that would begin with the sound of motorcycle boots on a diner floor and end with her standing at the window watching taillights disappear down the road towards somewhere she'd never been, wondering how it was possible that the worst morning she'd had in 11 days had also, somehow, been the most important one. She went to refill the coffee. She went back to work, and Cole Harrison sat in his booth and watched her go, with the particular expression of a man who has learned, at considerable cost, what it means to show up and who has spent years making sure he does not stop. The lunch rush should have been the busiest part of Maddie's day. It always was. Tuesdays specifically had a rhythm she could set her body to without thinking. The road crew from the highway project at the long table in the back, the regulars cycling through the counter, the occasional traveler passing through, who needed something fast and filling before they got back on the road. She had done this particular Tuesday rotation so many times that her feet knew the path between tables before her mind did. And on most days, that automation was the thing that kept her functional. But today the diner had a different quality to it. She noticed it first in the way people were talking. Not louder, actually quieter. More deliberate. Like the room had been rearranged slightly at some molecular level, and everyone was still adjusting to the new configuration without quite being able to name what had changed. The road crew at the back table had been watching Cole's booth since they came in, the way people watch something they're trying to decide whether they're afraid of. The couple from booth 4, the ones Rick had failed to adequately break at extended scrim break, were now finishing their meal and talking to each other in low voices, glancing occasionally at the riders spread across the counter and the corner booths. Gerald was still at the counter. He had been there for over 2 hours now, which was unusual. Gerald was a man of precise habits. He came in. He ordered the same thing. He drank 2 cups of coffee. He read whatever he had brought to read, and he left. He had been doing this every Tuesday for 4 years, and Maddie could not remember a single time he had stayed past the 90-minute mark. He was reading nothing. His coffee was untouched and going cold. He was watching Cole Harrison's booth with an expression Maddie couldn't quite categorize. She refilled his coffee without being asked. "You want to warm up, Gerald?" "Thank you, sweetheart." He wrapped his hands around the fresh cup. Then, without looking up at her, "That man over there, the big one. He the one who stopped Rick from giving you the speech this morning?" Word traveled fast in a room this size. "Something like that," she said. "Hell's Angels," Gerald said. It wasn't a question. He'd clearly read the vest. That's right. Gerald was quiet for a moment. He had the measured, unhurried way of a man in his late 60s who had arrived at his opinions slowly and held them with appropriate weight. My son-in-law's afraid of them, he said. Won't let my daughter take the highway route when he knows there's a rally. Says they're dangerous. Maddie didn't respond to that directly. She set the carafe down and wiped the counter nearby. They ordered the same thing as everyone else, she said. Paid their bill. Cleaned up after themselves. She paused. And someone I'd never met before today spent 40 minutes of her morning fixing my father's insurance authorization because one of them made a call. Gerald looked at her then. Really looked at her. Your daddy's in the hospital, he said. 11 days, she said. Gerald's jaw moved. He looked back at his coffee. He sat with that information for a moment, the way people sit with things that rearrange their understanding of what's been happening around them without their knowledge. You've been working doubles, he said. Yes, and none of us knew. I didn't tell anyone, she said. I didn't want. She stopped. She had been about to say she didn't want people to look at her differently, to see her as the struggling girl, to offer her the particular brand of uncomfortable sympathy that changes how a room treats you in ways that outlast the sympathy itself. I thought I could manage it quietly. Gerald was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket. Gerald, she started. You don't have to. I've been coming here every Tuesday for 4 years, he said. You've refilled my coffee without being asked every single time. You remembered that I take it with 1 sugar and a splash of cream after the first week and never made me say it again. He set 2 folded 20s on the counter and pressed them flat with 1 weathered hand. That's worth something. This isn't charity. This is a debt I should have been paying. She picked up the bills. She held them for a moment. Thank you, she said, and meant it in the full, uncomplicated way, not the performing gratitude way, not the graceful deflection way. Just thank you. Gerald picked up his coffee and finally, after 2 hours and 15 minutes, took a drink. What happened next happened quickly. The way things in a diner tend to happen in overlapping layers, multiple things at once. The kind of momentum that starts from one point and then spreads outward because rooms, like people, are more connected than they look. The road crew at the long table had apparently been having a conversation Maddie couldn't hear. She only knew this because Jimmy Reeves, the crew foreman, a square-built man from Bozeman who had been coming in 3 times a week for 8 months and who tipped exactly 15%, never more stood up from the table and walked to the counter. He put $30 down next to her carafe. Jimmy, she started. Overheard some things this morning, he said. He looked like he was mildly uncomfortable. The way practical men look when they're doing something that feels to them like an emotion. You've always been straight with us. Fast, no complaints. Get it right. Good people deserve a fair shake. He tapped the bills once. That's from the crew. Don't argue. He walked back to the table. 2 of the other crew members were watching. One of them, a young guy she knew only as the one who always ordered extra bacon, raised his coffee cup at her in a brief, sincere gesture that she received the same way. She stood at the counter with Gerald's 40 and Jimmy's 30 and looked at the diner around her. The room was different. She couldn't explain it more precisely than that. Something that had happened this morning had moved through the space and shifted it, the way a current moves through water, invisible but real, changing the direction of everything it touched. She went back to work. She was clearing a table near the window when she heard Cole's voice behind her, not directed at her, but close enough that she caught it. He was talking to Trace, the younger rider. She hadn't heard Trace say many words all morning, but now he was speaking in a low, even tone, and his words stopped her mid-motion. She reminds you of anyone, Trace was saying. A pause. Yeah, Cole said. She does. What do we do? Another pause. Longer. What we can, Cole said. Maddie didn't turn around. She kept clearing the table, stacking the plates with the practiced efficiency of someone who has made an art of not appearing to listen. But the exchange settled into her chest and stayed there, quiet and warm, the way a piece of information does when it confirms something you had already started to suspect. She was almost back to the kitchen with the tray when Rick appeared in the doorway. He looked different than he had that morning. She noticed it immediately, the set of his shoulders, the particular quality of his expression. The professional armor he wore so consistently that it had become his default face was slightly shifted, not removed but loosened, the way a coat looks when you've been wearing it for too long and the shape of starts to remember your body rather than the other way around. "Maddie," he said, "when you get a second." She delivered the tray, gave the kitchen the next order, and found him at the end of the counter. Rick Dalton, in 9 years of managing Silver Creek Diner, had apologized to an employee exactly once. Maddie knew this because the employee in question, a cook named Pete, who had been there before Rick and who had since moved to Tucson, had told her about it at his going-away dinner with the specific emphasis of a man describing a rare natural event. He said sorry, Pete had told her, genuinely astonished. "Just said it, like a person." Rick said it now, not elaborately, not with explanations or qualifications, or the long preamble of a man defending his way to an apology. Just, "I'm sorry for this morning. I should have asked what was happening before I said what I said." She looked at him. "How did you know?" she said. "About my dad. I mean, before Cole told you." Rick's expression did something complicated. "I didn't," he said. "That's the problem. I didn't know because I didn't ask. I saw performance metrics going down, and I responded to the metrics." He paused. "There's a person behind the metrics. I lost track of that." She had been angry at him, not the boiling, vocal kind of angry, but the quieter kind that lives behind the sternum and makes you careful with a person, because you know if you're not careful, you'll say the thing you can't take back. She had been carrying that particular anger for about 3 weeks now, since the first time he called her into his office and showed her the customer comment cards with the flagged complaints and spoke to her like she was a number that had stopped adding up correctly. The anger didn't vanish, but it changed shape. It became something more like recognition, the recognition that a person can be simultaneously doing their job responsibly and being completely blind to the human thing directly in front of them. She had seen that blindness up close this morning. She had also seen what happened when someone chose to look. "Okay," she said. He said, "Okay, I accept the apology. And I should have said something sooner. I didn't want anyone to think I couldn't handle it." "I know," Rick said. "I should have made it easier to say something. That's on me too." He put his hands in his pockets, a gesture she had never seen from him before. He looked younger when he did it. "Your schedule, I want to talk about your schedule. There are things we can adjust. Hospital visits, the shifts, there's flexibility I haven't been offering you that I should have been." She thought about the 2 a.m. running of numbers, the mental math she did in the dark while Danny slept, the way she had been budgeting her energy, the way you budget the last of a resource you're not sure can be replenished. "I'd like that conversation," she said. "When things are a little less," she gestured at the full diner. "Tonight," Rick said. "After close. We'll go through it." He started to turn away and then stopped. "For what it's worth, you're a good employee. Maddie, you always have been." "I was measuring the wrong thing." He went back to his office. She stood at the ends of the counter for a moment, and then Boomer's voice reached her from his stool 3 feet to her left. "That hurt him to say," Boomer observed into his coffee cup. "I know," she said. "Good managers can become bad ones when they stop looking at the people," he said. "And bad ones can remember how to be good when something forces them to look again." He glanced toward the office door. "Whether it sticks is a different question. But it's something." She refilled his coffee without being asked. He raised the cup. The afternoon was moving differently now. The lunch crowd was thinning, the particular kind of thinning that signals a shift in the day's energy, the moment when the rush-driven urgency drops and the room settles into its quieter afternoon register. The road crew had paid and left, Jimmy Reeves nodding at her on his way out with the single, solid nod of a man who says more with his head than his words. The family from the corner booth was gone, replaced by 2 college-age girls who were sharing a piece of pie and a laptop. Cole's group had not left. She had noticed this, how could she not, but had not commented on it or made it strange. treating their continued presence the way she treated any customer who stayed past the expected time, which was to keep refilling their coffee and leave them alone. But she was aware of them the way you're aware of a fire that's burning steadily nearby, not threatening, not something you need to manage, but something body registers without being told to. She was refilling Silver's coffee at the counter when he spoke to her for the first time since the brief exchange that morning. "How old were you when your mom left?" he said. She looked at him. He was older than the others, mid-60s, she guessed, with a weathered, deliberate quality to him, the look of a man who has passed through enough of life that he is no longer surprised by it but is still paying attention. 14, she said. Danny was 6, Silver nodded. He turned his coffee cup in a slow circle on the counter. "My mother left when I was 9, he said. "Different reasons, different time. But I remember," he paused, choosing the word "I remember" what it does to a kid. The specific kind of responsibility it puts on the oldest one. He looked at her. "You did right by your brother. Working doubles and keeping it from him so he doesn't have to carry it. That's not a small thing." "I don't know if it's right," she said honestly. "Sometimes I think I'm protecting him, and sometimes I think I'm just managing the narrative. Controlling what he knows so I don't have to see him worry." Silver considered this. "Maybe both," he said. "Things usually are both." She thought about Danny's taped-together shoe sole and the fact that he had not mentioned it to her, had chosen, at 17, to tape it himself rather than add one more item to whatever list he could tell she was already carrying. The parallel of it, both of them, protecting the other from the same information, hit her somewhere between the ribs. "He knows more than I think he does," she said. "Probably," Silver agreed. "Kids usually do." The bell above the door rang. She looked up automatically. The woman who walked in was not a regular customer. Maddie would have remembered her mid-30s, purposeful, carrying a paper bag from the pharmacy 2 blocks down and scanning the room with the focus of someone looking for a specific face. Her eyes landed on Cole's booth and she moved toward it without hesitation. Cole saw her coming and sat up slightly. It was the first time Maddie had seen him shift his posture, not nervousness. "Exactly, but a kind of readiness, Cole," the woman said. She set the pharmacy bag on the table. "Boomer said you called. What's the situation?" "What situation?" Maddie said. From 3 feet away, because she was holding a coffee carafe and there was no graceful way to pretend she wasn't standing right there. The woman looked at her. "Cole," said Maddie, "this is Dr. Karen Reyes. She's a physician. She volunteers with our chapter's outreach program." He paused. "I asked her to come in." Maddie set the carafe down on the nearest surface. "You asked a doctor to come in," she said. "You said your hands started shaking last week," Cole said. "You said you haven't seen a doctor. You said you don't have time." He met her eyes. "You have time right now. The diner is half empty. Rick will cover your tables for 15 minutes. "I already checked." "You already?" She stopped. "You talked to Rick about this?" "I talked to Rick about giving you 15 minutes, Cole said. "I didn't give him the medical details." Dr. Reyes was watching this exchange with the calm, professionally patient expression of someone who does not inject herself into situations until invited. "I'm not." Maddie started. "Not what?" Cole said. The question sat there. Not what? Not sick? She didn't know that. Not worth 15 minutes of attention? She knew that wasn't true. She told herself that wasn't true, but something in her had been operating for weeks on the internal logic that her body was a secondary priority, a system that could be run at a deficit until some later, unspecified date when things were stable enough to address it. Dr. Reyes said quietly, "I'm not here to alarm you. I'm here because sleep deprivation and sustained stress have real physical effects that are worth knowing about. That's all." 15 minutes. Maddie looked at the woman. She looked at Cole. She looked at her hands. They were shaking. 15 minutes, she said. They used the back booth, the broken one, with the flickering light. Dr. Reyes asked her questions in the brisk, thorough way of a person who has learned to extract necessary information quickly. When had the shaking started? How many hours of sleep on average? Any chest tightness, shortness of breath, headaches? Any history of anxiety before the last 3 weeks? Eating how often? What? Maddie answered all of it. The answers she gave were the honest ones, which were different from the ones she would have given any of her coworkers or her brother or her father. She was surprised by how different they were. She had not fully realized, until she said them aloud, how far the honest answers were from the ones she'd been performing. Dr. Reyes listened. She took a blood pressure reading with a portable cuff from the pharmacy bag. She asked Maddie to hold out both hands and watch the tremor for a moment. Then she sat back. "Your blood pressure is elevated," she said. "Not dangerously, but it's higher than it should be for someone your age. The tremor is consistent with severe sleep deprivation, combined with chronic elevated cortisol essentially. Your nervous system has been running an emergency protocol for so long that it's starting to show in your body." She paused. "None of this is permanent. None of it is alarming in the sense of being immediately dangerous. But it is a warning." "A warning," Maddie said. "Your body telling you that the current operating conditions are not sustainable," Dr. Reyes said. "It will compensate for a while longer. But the window is not unlimited." The words landed with specific weight because they were specific words, not "you should rest" or "take care of yourself," which she could deflect, but a clinical description of a timeline, a window. "Not unlimited. What do I do?" she asked. "The immediate things: eat a real meal today, not something grabbed between tables. A meal. Drink water consistently. If you're not sleeping more than 4 hours, talk to your doctor about short-term sleep support. There are non-habit-forming options." And Dr. Reyes looked at her steadily. "Let people help you. That's not a soft suggestion. That is a medical recommendation. Isolation under sustained stress accelerates the physical impact. You need your load distributed." "I'm working on that," Maddie said. Dr. Reyes looked toward Cole's booth. "I can see that," she said, and there was something in her voice that was not quite a smile, but was adjacent to one. She packed up the pharmacy bag. She gave Maddie her direct number, not the office line, my direct line, and told her to call if anything changed or worsened. She shook Maddie's hand with a firm, unhurried grip and said, "You're going to be okay. I mean that precisely, not just as a thing to say." She left. Maddie sat in the broken booth for a moment after she left. Then she did something she had not done since the morning of her father's heart attack, when she had been standing in the hospital hallway, waiting for someone to come out and tell her what was happening, and had realized that nobody was going to hold her up if she didn't hold herself up. She pressed both palms flat on the table. She breathed in through her nose for 4 counts and out through her mouth for 4. She did it 3 times. She didn't feel fixed. She felt like someone who has been driving on empty for 100 miles and has finally, barely reached a gas station, not recovered, not rested, but no longer running on nothing. She went back out to the floor. Cole was standing at the counter. This surprised her. He had been in the booth for most of the morning, and seeing him standing gave her a different sense of his size. He was a large man. She had registered this earlier, but proximity reaffirmed it: broad, solid, the kind of person who takes up real space without needing to announce it. He had his wallet out. "I'm paying the bill," he said. "You're the one who got coffee spilled on him," she said. "You shouldn't even be." "I'm paying the bill," he repeated, with the particular calm of someone who has already decided this and is simply waiting for the world to catch up. "And I want to talk to you for a minute first." "Okay," she said. He put the wallet back in his pocket, which she understood meant the talking was going to come before the paying. "The money Patricia saved you with the authorization," he said. "That's real. That helps. The shoes, those arrived Thursday." Boomer confirmed it. He paused, "But there's still the gap. The difference between what's covered and what you owe. The rent. The car." "I know," she said. "I'm working through it." "I know you are," he said. "I want to add to what you're working with." She felt her back straighten automatically, the reflex of pride activating without her permission. "Cole, I'm not asking," he said. It wasn't aggressive, it was simply direct. The way someone is direct when they've thought about how to say something and have arrived at the most honest version. "I'm telling you that when I leave today, there's going to be money in your apron pocket. I've already talked to the others. We each put in what we're putting in. That's not a debate or a negotiation, and it's not pity. He looked at her steadily. It's what people do when someone who deserves help is too proud to ask for it. They just do it. And then they let the person be proud about something else. She looked at him. The refusal was there, ready. The same one she'd deployed 3 times today. I don't take charity. I can manage. I don't want. She thought about Danny's shoe. She thought about the receipt in her pocket with the insurance numbers on it. She thought about Dr. Reyes saying, let people help you. That's not a soft suggestion. That is a medical recommendation. She thought about Emily, who had said she was fine. Okay, she said. Cole nodded once. There's one more thing, he said. She waited. He reached into his vest pocket, the inside one, the one she couldn't see, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it and set it on the counter between them. It was a name and a phone number, written in a different handwriting than the placemat paper from earlier. This is a woman named Grace Hendricks, he said. She runs a nonprofit out of Missoula Patient Family Support. They have a fund specifically for families, covering inpatient medical costs while a primary earner is also working. You might qualify. The application takes about 20 minutes, and Grace reviews them personally. He paused. She's a friend of Patricia's. Patricia already called her. Maddie looked at the paper. Patricia already called her, she repeated. This morning, Cole said, after she left. So Patricia, your insurance advocate friend, who was here for 40 minutes and fixed my father's authorization, also called a nonprofit fund on her way out of the diner. She makes efficient use of her time, Cole said. Maddie looked at the paper. She looked at Cole. She looked at the paper again. Who are you? She said. Not for the first time today. But the question meant something different now than it had the first time she asked it. The first time it had been about surprise. This time it was about something more like wonder. Who actually are you? Cole picked up the paper and held it out to her. She took it. Someone who learned too late what it costs to walk past something you can fix, he said. So now I don't walk past them. She folded the paper, put it in her pocket with the others. Her pocket was getting full folded receipts and phone numbers and the arithmetic of a life being slowly, carefully renegotiated. From the booth nearest the window, Trace spoke for only the 3rd time all day. Cole, he said. Quiet, even, no particular inflection. Cole turned. Trace had his phone in his hand. He turned it so Cole could see the screen. Something moved across Cole's face, quick, controlled, the briefest passage of something real before the control came back. What, Maddie said. What is it? Cole looked at her. It's nothing bad, he said. He paused, and the pause was the length of a man deciding how much to say. The guys from the chapter. Word got around about what was happening here today. Trace put a message out a couple hours ago, just what was going on. Nothing specific, and He stopped again. Cole, she said. He looked at Trace's phone. There's a fund being put together, he said. From the chapter, from some other members who aren't here. He said it carefully, precisely, with no embellishment. Guys from 3 different states. Some of them have been where you are. Some of them have lost people for the same reasons. They heard about Emily's situation, your situation, and he stopped. Maddie waited. She wasn't breathing correctly. She was aware of this distantly, the way you're aware of physical facts from a slight remove when something larger is occupying the foreground. How much? She said. Cole looked at Trace. Trace held up the phone so Cole could see the running total. Cole looked at it for a moment, and the thing that moved across his face this time was not brief and not entirely controlled. He looked at Maddie. Enough, he said. Enough, Maddie. The words hit her somewhere deep and structural. Enough. Not a specific number. She would see the number later. When Trace showed her the phone, when she sat in her car in the parking lot after her shift, and read it 3 times before it became real. But the word itself landed first, and it landed with the full weight of everything it meant. Enough meant the gap closed. Enough meant the rent covered. Enough meant the car repaired and the medication funded and the math, for the first time in 11 days, working out in her favor. Enough meant she could call her father tonight and hear his voice without running numbers in the back of her head. She put both hands on the counter. She looked at them still slightly trembling, still carrying the physical record of 8 days of insufficient sleep and sustained fear. And then she looked up at Cole Harrison, gray-bearded, scarred above one eyebrow, leather-vested. The man who had walked into her diner that morning as the most intimidating figure in a room full of nervous people. And she said the only thing she had left. "I don't know how to say thank you for this." "Then don't yet," Cole said. "Go finish your shift. Call your father tonight. Sleep more than 4 hours." He paused. "The rest figures itself out." He picked up his wallet. He paid the bill. He tipped her 50%, which Rick saw and said nothing about. And then Cole Harrison went back to his booth, and Maddie Carter went back to her tables. And the diner continued its ordinary Tuesday afternoon around them, plates and coffee and the kitchen bell and the sound of people living their lives in close proximity to each other, and nobody in the room was quite the same person they had been when the morning started. She was delivering pie to the college girls by the window when she heard it. The sound was low at first, a rumble that was easy to dismiss as road noise. A truck, something passing. But it grew. It gathered itself. It became unmistakably, specifically the sound of motorcycles. Not 2 or 3 many. Everyone in the diner heard it. The college girls looked up from their laptops. Gerald turned on his stool. The couple who had replaced the road crew at the back table stopped eating. Rick appeared in the kitchen doorway. The rumble peaked and then settled into a sustained, idling presence just outside. Maddie walked to the window. She looked out. The parking lot of Silver Creek Diner had filled. There were motorcycles she had not seen before, different riders, different vests, some she didn't recognize at all. They were parking in an orderly line, shutting off their engines one by one, the sound dying down gradually like a wave going out. She counted. She stopped counting at 22. Cole was standing behind her. She hadn't heard him get up, but he was there. She could feel the weight of his presence. That particular quality he had of occupying space in a way that was steady rather than imposing. "You said word got around," she said. "It did," he said. She couldn't finish the sentence. "Your chapter?" Boomer called to Cole from the counter. "And then some," Cole said. The first rider came through the door. She didn't know his name. She didn't know any of their names. He was somewhere in his 50s, broad across the chest, with kind eyes and a handshake he offered before he said anything at all. "Heard there was a young woman here who needed a hand," he said to Maddie. "We're not good at flowers, but we're pretty good at showing up." Behind him, another rider came through the door. Then another. Then 4 more. And Maddie Carter, who had been holding everything together with both hands for 11 days, without asking anyone for anything, stood in the middle of Silver Creek Diner on a Tuesday afternoon and understood, for the first time, that strength was not the same as solitude, and that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was let a room full of strangers prove to you that you were not as alone as you had decided to be. The first thing Rick Dalton did when 22 motorcycles pulled into his parking lot was walk out of the kitchen and stand very still in the middle of his diner. The second thing he did was count the available tables. Maddie noticed this the way his manager's brain overrode whatever else he was feeling and immediately began calculating logistics. Tables, seats, coffee inventory. Whether Janie could handle the extra load or whether he needed to call someone else in. She had worked for this man for 4 years, and she understood, in that moment, something she hadn't fully articulated before. Rick Dalton was not a cold person. He was a person who processed the world through systems. Systems were how he stayed functional. Systems were how he kept from being overwhelmed. And right now, his system was telling him that 22 new customers needed to be seated and served, and so that was what he was going to focus on, because the alternative, the full emotional weight of what was actually happening in his diner on this Tuesday afternoon, was something his system did not yet have a file for. "Janie," he called toward the back, "I need you on the floor, right now." Janie appeared in the kitchen doorway, assessed the room in approximately 1 second, and said, "On it." She had worked at Silver Creek for 7 years and was not a person who required extensive context. The riders came in steadily, not in a rush, not with noise or force, but with the particular organized calm of people who have traveled together and know how to move as a group without creating chaos. They spread through the available space naturally, filling booths and counter stools, some of them standing near the walls. When the seating ran out, nobody complaining, nobody demanding. A few of them nodded at Cole when they came in. A few spoke to Boomer or Silver. The writer who had come in first, the broad-chested man with the kind eyes who had shaken Maddie's hand, was talking quietly with Trace near the window, their heads bent close together. Maddie stood at the edge of the floor and watched it happen. She had served large groups before, touring groups, wedding parties, the occasional busload of seniors who stopped for lunch on their way to somewhere scenic. She knew the rhythm of feeding many people at once. But this was different from all of those. And the difference was not in the logistics. It was in the quality of attention. Every person who had walked through that door had come specifically here, specifically today, specifically because of something that had happened to her. She was aware of this in a way that was almost too much to hold a warmth that was so large it was almost uncomfortable. The way very bright light is still light even when it makes you squint. A woman touched her arm. Maddie turned. The woman was somewhere in her 60s, compact, sharp-eyed, with silver hair cut short and a vest that matched the others. Her name patch, said May. She had the posture of someone who has been underestimated so many times that she stopped noticing it somewhere around the age of 40 and started finding it useful. You're Madeline, May said. Maddie, she said automatically. Maddie, May nodded, accepting the correction as entirely reasonable. I'm May Holloway. I've been with the chapter adjacent to the chapter. I'm not a writer myself. My husband was for about 30 years. She paused. I heard about your father. News traveled fast, Maddie said. It did, May agreed. Cole texted about 6 people this morning. Those people texted about a dozen more. Word about a young woman working doubles while her daddy is in the hospital with a bad heart, that kind of thing moves fast in our community. She said it without sentiment, as pure information. We've all been somewhere close to where you are. Most of us have lost someone because the somewhere close to where you are turned into somewhere worse. We don't like watching that happen when there's something we can do. I don't know what to say, Maddie said. You don't have to say anything, May said. You have to eat something and then you have to get back to work because these people are going to need coffee. And I can see from here that your carafe is empty. She raised an eyebrow with the authority of a woman who has managed large groups of people for 3 decades. Priorities. Maddie almost laughed. She went and refilled the carafe. The next hour at Silver Creek Diner was the strangest and most specific hour Maddie Carter had ever worked. She moved through a room that was simultaneously her ordinary workplace and something completely transformed, serving coffee and pie and late lunch plates to 22 people she had never met and who had driven from distances she didn't know to a diner they'd never been to, because one text message from one man had described one young woman who was trying not to break. She kept her hands moving. It was the thing she knew how to do. Move, refill, deliver clear, reset. The rhythm of it was a kind of anchor. She could feel everything that was happening in the room, the weight and warmth of it, and also continue to function, because the functioning was the frame that kept her upright. Gerald was still at the counter. He had not left. She had refilled his coffee 4 times now, and he had not said anything about it, and she had not said anything about it, and they had arrived at a silent mutual understanding that he was staying until something finished that neither of them could define precisely. He was talking to a writer named Pete, different Pete from the cook who had moved to Tucson, who had ended up on the stool next to him, and who turned out to have grown up 20 miles from where Gerald had grown up, in a coincidence that Gerald received with the calm recognition of a man who has lived long enough to stop being surprised by the smallness of the world in the large spaces of Montana. They were talking about irrigation, Gerald's topic of choice. She passed them twice and caught fragments, acre feet, and water rights, and the particular drought of 2021, and felt something warm and slightly absurd move through her chest at the edge of an old rancher and a leather-vested biker, bonding over irrigation rights in the middle of what was Technically, one of the most extraordinary days of her life. Rick appeared at her elbow sometime around 2 o'clock. The table in the back, he said quietly. The large one. Some of them want to put money together. For you. He paused. I told them that was up to you. You told them yes, she said. He looked at her. I told them it was up to you, he repeated. But yes, I told them it was okay with me. He paused again. I also told them your coffee is good and they should come back. She stopped walking. Rick, she said. The tip split, he said quickly, reverting to manager language because the other language was clearly reaching its limit for him. I'm adjusting the tip split for today, so everything goes directly to you. Not pooled. All of it. She looked at him. Thank you, she said. He nodded once and went back to his office. She stood for a moment in the middle of the floor. Then she felt a hand on her shoulder light, brief, and turned to find Cole beside her. You doing okay? He said. That's what I'm supposed to ask the customers, she said. I know, he said. I'm asking anyway. She thought about it honestly, which was different from how she'd been answering that question for 11 days. It's a lot, she said. She looked at the room. At May holding court with 2 younger riders near the window. At Boomer and Silver at the counter, Boomer's laugh carrying over the ambient noise for a moment before settling back. At Trace, who was on his phone again, that same focused quiet about him. At 22 people who had driven here for no reason, except that someone they trusted had said there was a reason. I don't have a word for what this is. You don't need one, Cole said. You just need to let it be what it is. She looked at him. What does your sister look like? She said. The question surprised him. She saw a brief disruption in the steadiness of his expression, like a stone dropped in water. Emily, he said. Yes. He was quiet for a moment, not reluctant assembling. Blonde, he said. Lighter than yours. Blue eyes. She was shorter than she thought she was. She argued about her height constantly. The corner of his mouth moved. Stubborn. Funny in a dry way, the kind where you didn't always know if she was joking until after. She made really terrible coffee, but she made it for everyone who came to her house, because offering coffee was how she showed love. He paused. She had your same way of holding her chin up when she was tired. Like if she kept her face positioned right, nobody could tell. Maddie absorbed this. I do that, she said. I know, he said. That's the first thing I saw when I looked at you this morning. The first thing. Before the coffee. Before the tray and the spill and Rick's voice cutting through the diner. The first thing Cole Harrison had seen when he looked at Madeline Carter was a chin held at a specific angle, the angle of a woman, refusing to let her exhaustion show on her face. She pressed her lips together. I'm not her, she said. The same thing she had said to Boomer earlier. But this time it was different, not defensive, not a reassurance. More like a statement made to close a loop. I know I'm not her, no, Cole said. You're not. You're going to be okay in ways she wasn't. He said it with a certainty that was not performance. That's why I'm still here. She nodded. She went back to work. The afternoon continued to move in its altered way, and at some point Maddie stopped tracking time precisely and let it be carried by the rhythm of the room, the particular music of a diner that is very full and very active, and, strangely, very happy. Because it was, she realized. The room was happy, not in a loud performed way in the deep, specific way that happens when a group of people share a common purpose, and the purpose is genuinely good. She heard laughter from multiple directions. She heard the kind of conversations that happen between people who have just met but have enough in common that they skip the surface and go straight to the thing, real stories, real names, real places. A writer named Hank telling Gerald about a trip he had made through Wyoming in 1987 that bore a suspicious structural resemblance to one of Gerald's own stories. May and Janie in what appeared to be a deeply earnest discussion about the best method for pie crust that Janie was taking notes on. Boomer, who had apparently ordered a second piece of apple pie, telling the college girls at the window table something that made them both cover their mouths with laughter. The tip jar at the counter, which usually held a handful of single bills at the end of a lunch shift, had become something else. She didn't look at it. Directly, it felt too large to look at directly. Like the sun, but she was aware of it, the way you're aware of something with mass. At 2:43, her phone rang. She stepped toward the back booth, the broken one, the one with the flickering light that had become her private corner today, and answered. It was Danny. Hey, he said. How's your shift? She almost said fine. The word was fully formed, ready to go. The automatic response that she had dispensed so many times today that it should have been worn completely smooth by now. Long, she said instead. Good, but long. Something happened today. I'll tell you about it tonight. A pause on his end. She could hear the sounds of the school hallway lockers. Voices, someone calling a name in the distance. Good something or bad something? He asked. Good, she said. Really good, actually. Unexpected. She paused. Danny, how are your shoes? Silence she had not planned to ask. It came out of whatever had been loosened in her. Today, the wall she had built between what she let herself see and what she responded to. My shoes are fine, Danny said. The answer was immediate and slightly too quick. Danny, a longer silence. The tape's holding, he said finally. I know, she said, I saw. You should have told me. You have enough going on, he said. He was 17 and his voice still did that thing where it caught occasionally between registers. And right now it was doing it on the word enough in a way that hit her somewhere she hadn't expected. I didn't want to add. New shoes are coming Thursday, she said. Work boots. Good ones. Don't ask me how. I'll explain it tonight. Okay. Another pause. Okay, he said. Then, are you Maddie? Are you okay? You sound different. She considered how to answer that. I am different, she said. From this morning. I'll explain that tonight too. Is Dad is okay, she said. The medication's going to be approved by Friday. He might come home next week. She said it and felt the truth of for the first time, not as a possibility she was hoping for, but as something concrete, something moving toward her. I'm going to call him tonight. Tell him something true for once. Danny's breath on the other end of the line was slow and deliberate, the breath of a teenager who is trying to hold his face steady. Good, he said. His voice was slightly rougher than usual. That's good, Maddie. How are your grades? She said. Fine, Daniel, they're fine. 91 in Calc, 88 in English. I'm working on the English essay this weekend. Good, she said. Keep working. No job, no dropping activities. That's still the deal. Yeah, he said. I know. A pause. Maddie, yeah? I taped my shoe because I didn't want you to worry, he said. Not because I thought you didn't care. She pressed her hand flat against the wall of the booth. The surface was cool. She concentrated on that, the specific coolness of it, the realness of it, and breathed. I know, she said. I know, baby. He hated being called baby. She did it anyway. Sometime, in specific moments, and he accepted it in specific moments, and this was one of them. Tonight, she said. I'll tell you everything tonight. Okay, he said. And then, because he was 17 and also because he was Danny, did you eat lunch? She thought about it. No, she admitted. Maddie, I will, she said. I promise. She hung up. She stood in the broken booth for 30 seconds. Then she walked to the kitchen, made herself a plate eggs, toast, the soup that was today's special, and stood at the prep counter and ate all of it in 6 minutes, which was not relaxing or enjoyable, but was real food consumed by a body that had needed it since approximately 7 this morning. Dr. Reyes had said, eat a real meal. She ate the real meal. When she came back out, Cole was waiting near the end of the counter. Your brother, he said. He's good, she said. Smart kid. Responsible kid. Been taping his shoe sole, so I wouldn't worry. Cole's expression did the thing it did, that brief movement of something real before the steadiness came back. He sounds like her, he said. Emily used to hide things from me so I wouldn't worry. It's a specific kind of love, Maddie said. Hiding things. It is, Cole said. It's also a specific kind of lonely. She thought about Danny at the kitchen table at 11, pretending not to hear. She thought about herself at 17, the year after their mother left, learning to make dinner from instructions she found online, and telling her father everything was fine in a voice she had practiced until it was smooth. We're going to have to stop that, she said. Danny and me. We're going to have to stop hiding things from each other. That's a good thing to stop, Cole said. It's going to take practice, she said. Most things worth doing do, he said. From across the room, May called out. Maddie, the writer at table 7, wants to know if the lemon meringue is homemade. Tell him yes, Maddie called back. Tell him the meringue is Ruth's. She's been making it the same way since 1987, and she will not discuss modifications. May relayed this information. The writer at table 7 said something that made the two people nearest him laugh, and Maddie Carter picked up her carafe and went back to her tables because the diner was full and the coffee needed to be warm, and the work was the thing that was holding her upright. And she had learned today that being held upright by something steady was not weakness, it was just how structures worked. It was sometime around 3:30 that the moment happened. She was at the far end of the counter, refilling Gerald's coffee for what was now the 6th time, and she heard the diner go slightly quiet, not the dramatic silence from that morning, not the held breath tension of people braced for something violent, but a different kind of quiet, a listening kind. She turned. Cole Harrison was standing in the middle of the diner floor. He didn't have anything in his hands. He wasn't performing, wasn't making a speech, wasn't positioning himself for effect. He was just standing there, large, steady, present, and people were looking at him because he was the kind of person people look at when he decides to occupy the center of a room. I want to say something, he said. Not loudly. He didn't need to say it loudly. The room listened. Most of you know why we're here, Cole said. And most of you know the story about Emily. About what happens when someone is carrying too much alone and the people around them don't push past the fine. He paused. This morning, I walked into this diner expecting nothing. A cup of coffee and a seat. And instead, I met a young woman who was doing everything right in every way, and I saw what it was costing her, and I could not walk past that. He paused again. Because I walked past it once, I am not going to walk past it again. The room was completely still. Maddie had stopped moving. She was at the counter with the carafe in her hand, and she could not have moved if she had tried. What happened today in this diner, Cole continued, is what we talk about wanting to be. We talk about brotherhood and community and looking out for people. Today we actually did it, and I want this young woman to know. He looked at Maddie directly, and his expression was the most open she had seen it all day. The steadiness still there, but the door behind it, fully open. Now I want Maddie Carter to know that she didn't just receive something today. She reminded a room full of people why they wanted to be who they are. Silence. Then May started clapping. It wasn't dramatic, it was the sincere, unhurried applause of a woman who means it completely. And then Boomer joined, and Silver and Trace, and the rider with the kind eyes who had come in first, and Gerald from the counter in his careful, measured way, and Jimmy Reeves, who had apparently come back in at some point without her noticing, and Janie from the edge of the kitchen doorway, and Rick Dalton appearing from his office, standing in his doorway and clapping in the quiet, slightly awkward way of a man who is doing it because it's right, even though it's not a thing he is entirely comfortable with. Maddie stood at the counter. Her hands were shaking. Both of them. The fine, persistent tremor that had been following her for 8 days, except that right now it felt different. Right now it felt less like something breaking and more like something vibrating at the frequency of being completely, entirely, overwhelmingly felt. She looked at Cole. She looked at the room. She looked at her hands. And then she set the carafe down very carefully on the counter and pressed both palms flat against the surface and closed her eyes for 3 seconds and said nothing. Because there was nothing that was adequate, and she had learned today that sometimes the right response to something too large for words was simply to let it be too large and stand inside it anyway. When she opened her eyes, Cole was still looking at her. Okay, she said. Her voice was steadier than she expected. Okay, he said back. May had already moved on to organizing the check situation with the businesslike efficiency of a woman who understands that sentiment is real and logistics are also real and both need attention. Boomer was explaining to the college girls something about the difference between club chapters that they seemed genuinely interested in. The room was settling back into its particular warmth. The warmth that had been building all afternoon, not heat. Exactly. But the felt temperature of a space that contains people who are being fully, genuinely present with each other. Maddie picked up the carafe. She went around the room. She refilled every cup that needed filling Ryder, regular, stranger Gerald, and she did it the way she had done it 10,000 times before, efficiently and without fanfare. And she did it feeling completely different than she had ever felt doing it, because the room was different, and the day was different, and she was different. And the difference had a shape now, instead of just a weight. At 4:15, they started to leave. Not all at once, gradually. In small groups, the way people leave when they've been somewhere good, and they're not in a rush, but they also have roads to travel and places to be before dark. They paid their checks. They left tips that Janie would later describe, with characteristic understatement, as not normal. Several of them shook Maddie's hand. A few of them hugged her, the specific brief hugs of people who don't necessarily know you but mean it completely. May held her for a moment longer than the others. "You have my number," she said, because at some point during the afternoon, she had written it on one of the order tickets and tucked it into Maddie's apron pocket, which Maddie had not noticed until just now. "You call if it gets hard again. Not if you need something dramatic, just if you need a voice." "Okay," Maddie said. "Good girl," May said. It was the kind of thing that would have felt condescending from most people and felt entirely right from May. Trace shook her hand last before Cole. He was quiet, as he had been all day, but he looked at her directly in a way that meant something, even without words. "You reminded him of her," Trace said. "He doesn't talk about her much. He talked about her today." He paused. "That matters. More than you know." He went out. Cole was the last one. He had his jacket in his hand. He'd taken it off at some point during the afternoon without her noticing. He stood at the door and looked back at her across the room, which was slowly returning to its ordinary late afternoon state. Janie clearing tables, Gerald finally at last getting up from his stool. "Your apron pocket," Cole said. She looked down. She reached into the front pocket of her apron, the one that already held the folded receipts and the phone numbers and the paper with Grace Hendricks's name on it. There was an envelope, thick, sealed. She looked up at Cole. "The fund," he said. "From the chapter, and from today," he paused. "It's enough. I already told you that, but now it's in your hand." She held the envelope. She did not open it, not yet, not here. She would open it in her car, later, in the parking lot when the diner was quiet, and she would sit there for a long time, looking at the number and making herself believe it was real. But right now she just held it. "Cole," she said. He waited. "Tell me something about her," she said. "Emily, tell me one more thing about her." He looked at her for a moment. "She made everyone feel like they were the most interesting person in the room," he said. "She had that thing, you know how some people give you their full attention and you can feel it. She did that with everyone. Waitresses, strangers, kids, didn't matter. Everyone felt it." He paused. "She would have liked you." Maddie held the envelope. The room was quiet. "I think I would have liked her too," she said. Cole nodded. He put on his jacket. He pushed the door open and the afternoon light came in for a moment, and then the door closed behind him, and the sound of motorcycles starting up came through the walls of the diner one by one, then several at once, then all of them. A sustained rumble that traveled through the floor, under her feet and up through her legs and into her chest, where it stayed for a moment before the engines pulled away, and the sound diminished, and then it disappeared entirely, leaving behind the ordinary sounds of a Tuesday afternoon in Montana. Maddie stood in the middle of Silver Creek Diner. She had an envelope in one hand and a carafe of coffee in the other, and her hands were still shaking, and she was profoundly, specifically tired in the way of someone who has been moving at a deficit for a long time and has only just been given permission to know it. Gerald passed her on his way to the door. He patted her arm once brief. "Precise, Gerald. Same time next Tuesday," he said. She almost laughed. "Same time next Tuesday," she said. He left. Janie appeared beside her. "You want to take the last hour?" Janie said. I can close. Maddie thought about it. She thought about Danny at the kitchen table. About the phone call she was going to make to her father tonight, the real one, the one where she told him something true. About the envelope in her hand and the numbers inside it that she was going to look at in the parking lot until they became real. About the list of people whose phone numbers were now folded in her apron pocket. Patricia, Dr. Reyes May, Grace Hendricks, Cole's placemat paper. A network that had not existed this morning and existed now. A map of people who had said, in one way or another, this part is handled. You don't carry this one alone. She thought about sleeping more than 4 hours. Yeah, she said. Yeah, I'll take the last hour. Good, Janie said, and went back to clearing tables. Maddie set the carafe down on the counter. She stood in the quiet of the almost empty diner and held the envelope and felt the specific weight of a day that had rearranged something fundamental about how she understood her life. Not fixed, not resolved, not finished, but shifted. Shifted towards something that had more people in it, more hands, more voices willing to say, I see you. I'm not walking past. She thought about what Cole had said, standing in the middle of the floor. She reminded a room full of people why they wanted to be who they are. She had not done anything remarkable. She had carried a tray and answered a phone and spilled a cup of coffee on the most intimidating man in the room. She had been too exhausted to be afraid. She had been too honest to pretend. And somehow that had been enough. Enough to start something. Enough to open a door she hadn't known was there. She tucked the envelope into her apron pocket, next to the receipts and the phone numbers, and the folded paper map of a day she would spend the rest of her life trying to explain to people who hadn't been there. She picked up the carafe. She went to work. She opened the envelope in the parking lot. She had told herself she would wait until she got home, give herself the privacy of her own kitchen, her own chair, the specific safety of a space that was entirely hers. But she got to her car, sat down, put the key in the ignition, and then did not turn it. She sat for a moment with the engine off and the afternoon light coming through the windshield and the envelope on the passenger seat, and she understood that she was not going to be able to drive anywhere until she knew. She picked it up. She opened it. She looked at the number for a long time. She had been running financial calculations in her head for 11 days with the precision of someone who could not afford to round. She knew exactly what the gap was between what she owed and what she had. She knew it the way you know the dimensions of a room you've been locked in, not because you've measured it, but because you've moved around inside it so many times that your body has memorized every wall. The number in the envelope covered the gap, all of it. Not almost, not close, not approximately, all of it. The hospital balance, the rent, the car repair, with enough left over that she could pay the credit card and still have something remaining. A small breathing room, a margin she had not had in 3 weeks. She sat with that. She sat with it for 4 minutes, which she knew because she watched the clock on her dashboard without meaning to, the way she had been watching clocks all day. 4 minutes of sitting in a parking lot in Montana, holding an envelope that represented the combined decision of people she had mostly never met to drive somewhere they had never been and give something real to someone they had only heard described. Then she put her forehead on the steering wheel and cried. Not the controlled 4-minute cry from 3 weeks ago in this same parking lot. Not the managed release of someone allowing themselves a brief interval before they had to go back in and be functional. This was the other kind, the full kind, the kind that happens when the thing you have been bracing so long finally moves and the muscles that were holding against it suddenly have nothing to push on. It lasted longer than she intended. It was louder than she expected. She was grateful for the empty parking lot. When it was done, she sat back up. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her uniform. She looked at the envelope one more time. Then she started the car and drove home. Danny was in the kitchen when she walked in, exactly where she expected him to be at the table with his laptop open and 3 different notebooks spread around him. The particular productive chaos of a student who has been working long enough that he has stopped noticing the mess. He looked up when she came in and did the thing. He always did the quick, practice scan that she recognized as his version of the same thing she did when she came home. Checking the state of things without making it obvious that he was checking. Hey, he said. He stopped. Different, she said. I was going to say tired, he said, but also different. Yeah, she sat down across from him at the table. She put the envelope on the table between them. He looked at it. He looked at her. He did not touch it. Tonight, she said, I'm going to tell you everything. The real numbers, the real situation, all of it. I should have done that sooner, and I didn't. And that's going to change starting right now. She paused. But first, I need you to tell me something honestly. Okay, he said. The shoe, she said. He closed his eyes briefly. The expression on his face, a 17-year-old's version of being caught, which carried its own specific dignity, made her chest hurt in a tender way. I didn't want to add to the list, he said. I know, she said. Danny, look at me. He looked at her. We're stopping that, she said. Both of us. We're done hiding things from each other to protect each other. It doesn't actually protect anything. It just means we're both carrying more than we have to, because neither one of us is asking for help. She paused. I learned that today. From a stranger who learned it the hard way. She pushed the envelope slightly toward him. Open it. He opened it. He looked at the number. His jaw moved. Maddie, he said. I know, she said. How I told you. Tonight. I'll tell you everything. She reached across the table and closed the envelope and pushed it back to the center. But the short version is, someone saw me struggling today and decided not to walk past it. And then he told some people, and they told some people, and about 22 of them drove to the diner this afternoon. She paused. Good people, Danny, real ones. Danny looked at the envelope. His eyes were doing the thing they did when he was working to control his expression, a slight tightening around the outside. The particular stillness of a young man who has been the steady one for too long and hasn't yet given himself permission to stop. Are you okay? He said. His voice was careful. Actually okay. Not the version you say when I ask. She thought about Dr. Reyes and the blood pressure reading and the word sustainable used in a clinical context about her current operating conditions. She thought about May's phone number in her apron pocket. And Cole saying, let people help you as a medical recommendation, not a soft suggestion. I'm going to be, she said. That's the honest answer. I'm not there yet, but I can see it from here. And that's new, she paused. That's new as of today. Danny nodded slowly. Then he did something he had not done in a long time. He reached across the table and put his hand over hers. Not dramatically. Just placed it there, his big, still growing hand over hers, and left it. They sat like that for a moment. Call Dad, Danny said. Tonight, she said. No, before dinner. Call him now. She looked at her brother, 17 years old, tape shoot, 91 in calculus, hiding things out of love, asking her to call their father right now, because he understood, instinctively, that some things should not wait until after dinner. Yeah, she said. Okay, now. She called her father. Thomas Carter answered on the second ring, which meant he had been awake, which he often was in the afternoons. The hospital days had their own rhythm. Long stretches of waiting broken by brief intervals of activity. And he had described it to her on previous calls with the patient humor of a man who was not naturally patient, but was working at it. Maddie girl, he said. His voice had the specific quality it always had when she called warm, immediately present, the voice of a man for whom his daughter's phone call was genuinely the best part of whatever hour it arrived in. Hey, Dad, she said. You sound different, he said, because apparently this was the theme of the evening. Everything okay? She had prepared for this call. She had planned it, during the drive home, what she would say, how she would frame it, how to share the good news without making him feel guilty about the difficulty that had preceded it. She had a version ready that was honest and controlled and would not alarm him. She opened her mouth and said something completely different. She told him the truth. Not all of it, not the specific numbers, those could wait until he was home and his heart was stronger and the cardiologist was satisfied with his progress. But the shape of it, the reality of the last 11 days, the doubles and the 3 hours of sleep and the math that hadn't worked until today. She told him about Cole, about Patricia, and the insurance authorization, about 22 motorcycles in a parking lot. She told him about Danny's shoe and the envelope. She told him about the flickering light in the back booth and sitting down for the first time in 8 days and her hands shaking against her will. She told him she had not been fine. She had not been fine, and she was sorry she had let him believe she was. And she was going to stop doing that because she had learned today, at considerable cost and considerable grace, that letting people believe you're fine when you aren't is not a kindness, it's a distance. And she did not want distance from her father. Not now. Not when he was in a hospital bed fighting for a heart that she needed to keep beating for a very long time. There was a silence on his end when she finished. A long one. "Dad," she said. "I'm here," he said. His voice was different now. Rougher. "I'm right here." "Are you okay?" she said. "I didn't want to stress Maddie." He said her name the way he had always said it, since she was small, with a completeness to it, as if her name in his mouth was a complete sentence. "I have been lying in this bed for 11 days, knowing something was wrong and not knowing what and not pushing, because you kept saying fine, and I kept accepting fine because I didn't want to make things harder for you." A pause. "We have both been protecting each other from the same information." She almost laughed. She had said those exact words to Danny 20 minutes ago. "Yes," she said. "We have your brother?" Thomas said. "He's right here," she said. "He's good. He's got a 91 in calculus." A sound from Thomas that was something between a laugh and a breath. "That's my boy," he said. "He is," she agreed. "He taped his shoe so I wouldn't worry." Another sound. Rougher. "He gets that from you," Thomas said. "I know," she said. "We're stopping it. All of us." "Good," Thomas said. "That's Maddie. That's good." He was quiet for a moment. "This man, Cole, the one who stayed. Yes, I want to thank him." "He'd say you don't need to," she said. "I know he'd say that," Thomas said. "I want to anyway. A man who stays when he could leave, that's not nothing. That's not something you let pass without acknowledgement." His voice had the particular quality it got. When he was saying something, he meant deeply slower, more deliberate, like he was placing each word carefully. "You tell me more about him when I get home." "When are you coming home?" she said. "Doctor says potentially next week," Thomas said. "The medication, they said it's being approved?" "Something about an advocate." "Friday," Maddie said. "By end of business. You start Saturday if the cardiologist orders it immediately, which I'm going to request." A silence. "You researched all of this," Thomas said. "I've had the policy numbers memorized for a week," she said. Another sound, this one full and genuine and warm. The laugh of a man who recognizes his daughter completely. "My girl," he said. She pressed her hand flat on the kitchen table, next to Danny's hand, and breathed. "I'll call you tomorrow," she said. "In the morning. Not just to check in, actually talk." Okay, he said. "Maddie, yeah?" "Sleep," he said. "More than 4 hours, doctor's orders." She smiled. "I'm working on it," she said. She hung up. Danny was looking at her. "How is he?" said. "He's going to be okay," she said, and meant it. This time, in the full sense, not as a hope she was performing for his benefit, but as something she actually believed, a thing she could feel the edges of, solid and real. Danny exhaled. It was a long, slow exhale, the kind that carries something with it. Some held thing releasing, the specific relief of a 17-year-old who has been carrying the weight of not knowing whether his father was truly okay and has been given, at last, permission to put it down. "Okay," he said. "Good." He looked at the envelope on the table. "So what do we do now?" "We eat dinner," she said. "And then I tell you everything. And then you go to bed at a reasonable hour because you have school tomorrow and an English essay this weekend." She stood up. "And I sleep more than 4 hours." "I'll make dinner," Danny said. "You don't have to." "I want to," he said. He was already standing, already moving toward the kitchen with the particular purposefulness of a teenager who has found something concrete to do with an emotion that would otherwise have nowhere to go. "I've been making that pasta thing you like. The one from the video. I've made it 3 times while you were working doubles." He paused. "I got pretty good at it." She looked at her brother. He was tall. She kept forgetting how tall he had gotten. The way you forget about incremental changes in people you see every day. He had their father's jaw and their mother's eyes and a way of standing in a kitchen that was entirely his own. "Since when do you cook?" she said. "Since you started working doubles," he said simply. Someone had to. She sat back down at the table. She let him cook. She sat at the kitchen table and listened to the sounds of her brother moving around the kitchen, the water running, the particular clank of the pot she always used for pasta, the refrigerator opening and closing, and she put her hands flat on the table and looked at them. Still, the shaking had not completely stopped, but it was quieter than it had been. Dr. Reyes had said it would ease with sleep and food and the reduction of cortisol that came from a burden distributed. She had provided 2 of the 3 today. The third was happening right now, in the kitchen, in the sound of water coming to a boil. She thought about Cole Harrison. She thought about him driving away this afternoon, the sound of the motorcycles pulling out of the parking lot, the diminishing rumble, the silence they left behind. She wondered where he was now. Some road in Montana, she supposed, the kind of long flat road that goes on and on until it becomes the horizon. She wondered what he thought about on those roads, whether he thought about Emily, whether today had given him something. The way he had said it might a room full of people reminded of who they wanted to be. She thought she might write him a letter, not a text a letter, the kind that takes time to write because the things you're trying to say require that time. She had his information. Trace had pressed a card into her hand on his way out, just a name and an address, no phone number, no email. Just Cole Harrison and an address in Billings. The old-fashioned kind of contact information. She thought that was probably exactly right for the old-fashioned kind of thing she wanted to say. She would write it this week. She would tell him about the phone call with her father, about Danny making pasta, about the envelope and the number inside it and the 4 minutes she sat in the parking lot before she cried, about what it felt like to have the math work out for the first time in 11 days. She would tell him that she had not said fine once today after 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That was a record. She would tell him she intended to keep breaking it. The dinner was good. Danny had, in fact, gotten pretty good at the pasta. He had made garlic bread from a recipe he'd apparently found and memorized. And he had set the table with the specific care of someone who understood that tonight was a kind of night and wanted the table to reflect that without making a big thing of it. Plates that matched, napkins folded, 2 glasses of water. They ate. And then, because she had promised, she told him everything. The real numbers. The insurance situation before Patricia fixed it. The conversation with Rick that morning and the way Cole had stepped in. Dr. Reyes and the blood pressure reading. May's phone number. The nonprofit in Missoula that Patricia had already called. The shoes arriving Thursday. All of it in order, the way it had happened, not managed or softened. Danny listened to all of it without interrupting. He was good at listening. She had always known this about him. The quality of attention he brought to things, the way he tracked information. He would be good at whatever he decided to do with his life, she thought, because the people who know how to listen are always valuable. In every field, in every room. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "So a biker saved us," he said finally. "A group of bikers saved us," she said, "and a patient advocate, and a doctor, and an old rancher named Gerald who has been drinking his coffee at our counter every Tuesday for 4 years." She paused. "And Rick Dalton a little bit." Reluctantly. Danny smiled. It was small but real. "Gerald," he said. "I like Gerald. You've never met Gerald." "You've told me about him," Danny said. "The guy who always orders the same thing and never complains. That's the kind of person I want to be when I'm old." She looked at her brother across the dinner table. "You're already kind of that person," she said. He made a face, the 17-year-old's version of being embarrassed by a compliment, which was slightly different from the adult version in its authenticity. "Don't be weird," he said. "Too late," she said. They did the dishes together. Danny washed. Maddie dried. The way they had done it since their mother left and their father had instituted kitchen chores. Wafas instituted kitchen chores with the slightly desperate efficiency of a man learning to run a household he had not previously been responsible for. It was one of the rhythms of their life together, unremarkable, repetitive, and for that reason sustaining. Maddie, Danny said, halfway through the dishes. Yeah, I'm going to tell you when things are wrong, he said. Going forward. I'm not going to tape stuff and not say anything. Good, she said. Same. But you have to actually tell me, he said. Not just say you will and then not. I know, she said. I will. I'm going to practice. We both are, he said. We both are, she agreed. He handed her the pot. She dried it. They finished the dishes. She slept 7 hours that night. Not a perfect sleep. She woke, once around, two, the body's habit of its recent crisis, refusing to be broken in a single night. She lay in the dark for a moment, with the familiar sensation of numbers beginning to assemble in her head, the old inventory starting to compile. And then she thought, deliberately and specifically, the authorization is approved. The rent is covered. The car is going in next week. Dad is coming home. Danny has shoes coming Thursday. The numbers assembled into a different shape than they had for 11 days. She went back to sleep. When she woke up, it was light outside. She lay still for a moment and felt the specific quality of having slept enough, a heaviness that was restoration rather than deficit. The feeling of a body that has been given what it needed and registered it. She had forgotten what that felt like. She had not realized she had forgotten until it came back. She got up. She made coffee. She sat at the kitchen table, Danny still asleep. The house quiet in the specific way of early morning, and she put her hands flat on the surface and looked at them. Steady. Not entirely, there was still a faint trace of the tremor, the body not yet fully recovered. But steady enough to see the difference. Steady enough to know the distance she had traveled in the last 24 hours. She thought about what Cole had said, standing in the middle of the diner. She reminded a room full of people why they wanted to be who they are. She had not done anything extraordinary. She had shown up to work, exhausted and honest, and had dropped a cup of coffee on the wrong man at the right moment. She had sat down in a booth when someone told her to. She had answered questions truthfully instead of saying fine. She had let people see her shaking. That was all. And somehow all of that had been enough to start something, a chain of small decisions made by other people who had seen something real and responded to it rather than walking past. Patricia's efficient phone call. Dr. Reyes with the pharmacy bag. May writing a phone number on an order ticket. Trace sending a text message that traveled across 3 states in 2 hours. 22 motorcycles in a parking lot at 3 in the afternoon. Gerald staying until it was finished. She wrote Cole's letter that morning, at the kitchen table, before Danny woke up. She had not written a handwritten letter since high school, and she had expected it to be awkward, the physical process of writing by hand, the inability to delete and rewrite the way you could on a screen. Instead, she found that the constraint was useful. She wrote slowly, and she meant every word because she could not take any of them back. And the letter that emerged was honest in the precise, unvarnished way of something that has no revision option. She told him about the parking lot, about Danny, about her father's voice on the phone when she stopped saying fine. She told him that she had slept 7 hours. She told him that her hands were steadier this morning. She told him about the pasta and the garlic bread and the dishes. She told him that she thought he was right, that strength was not the same as solitude, and that she had been confusing the two for long enough that the confusion had started to feel like identity, and she was working on that. She told him she was going to be okay. She meant it completely. At the end, she wrote, "You said someone should have walked in on a Tuesday morning and made the call for Emily. I think that's true. I also think that carrying that knowledge for as long as you've carried it and letting it make you someone who walks in and makes the call for other people, that's not a small thing. Cole, that's the opposite of a small thing. I don't know if that helps, but I thought you should hear it." She sealed the envelope. She wrote the Billings address on the front. She put it on the table to mail on her way to work. The weeks that followed were not easy. Recovery from 11 days of deficit does not happen in a single good night's sleep, and the hospital bills, though manageable now in a way they hadn't been before, were still bills that required paying and tracking and the specific ongoing vigilance of a person who learned not to trust assumed safety. Her father's medication was approved Friday, as Patricia had promised. He started it Saturday. His cardiologist called it a strong early response. He came home 12 days later, a Wednesday afternoon. Danny at school, Maddie leaving work 2 hours early because Rick had told her to without being asked. She had been in the car in the hospital parking lot when she called Danny to tell him. He's home. She's good. He's home. Danny had said, okay. Just that one word, and she could hear in it everything it was carrying a month of held breath, released in a single syllable. She helped her father into the house. She made him the soup he liked. She sat across from him at the kitchen table, at the same table where she had told Danny everything. And she looked at her father's face, thinner than it had been, slower moving but present, alert himself, and she understood with a specificity that had not been available to her during the crisis what she had been fighting to protect. Not the abstract idea of her father, this man. His particular laugh. The way he held his coffee cup with both hands. The specific seriousness with which he approached Gerald-style topics like irrigation and weather patterns and the reliability of local contractors. This face you're staring, Thomas said. I know, she said. You do that when you're thinking, he said. I know that too, she said. He reached across the table and patted her hand once brief. Precise. The gesture of a man who shows love in the same understated register as Gerald and Trace and all the people she had known all her life, who said the most important things in the smallest motions. Thank you, he said, for what you did while I was in there. I just worked my shifts, she said. Maddie, he said. She looked at him. Thank you, he said again. This time, it was fuller, the whole weight of it. The understanding that he knew, now, what the last month had cost her. And that the thank you was not for any single thing, but for all of it. For staying upright. For keeping Danny on track. For not falling apart even when she was falling apart. For calling him and finally saying something true. She pressed her lips together. You would have done the same, she said. I hope so, he said. But you're the one who did. 3 weeks after her father came home, a package arrived at the diner. Matta found it on the counter. When she came in for the morning shift, a medium-sized box. No return address, but a Billings postmark. Her name on the front in large, slightly irregular handwriting she recognized immediately. She opened it. Inside was a coffee mug, a good one. Heavy ceramic, simple design, the kind that holds heat well. There was a note tucked inside it, written on the back of what appeared to be a gas station receipt. The handwriting was Cole's. It said, for the record, your coffee was fine. The cup just ended up where it was supposed to be. CH. Underneath that, in smaller writing, Emily would have liked the garlic bread story. She held the mug. She set it on the counter. She filled it with coffee and carried it through her shift. And when customers asked about the new mug, she said it was a gift from someone she'd met on a Tuesday morning, which was true. And which was also about as accurate a summary of what had happened as she could manage in the time it took to refill a table's coffee. The Silver Creek regulars noticed she was different. Not loudly different, she was not a loud-mouthed person, had never been. But in the specific, observable ways, she asked more questions and accepted more answers. When someone looked tired, she didn't just refill their coffee. She stopped for a moment and said, "Are you doing okay?" Not the automatic version of the question, but the real one. The one she had learned to ask by having it asked of her. She took her breaks when she was supposed to take them. She ate lunch. She answered her phone when Danny called instead of letting it go to voicemail when she was busy. She stopped saying fine when she wasn't. It took practice. She had been right about that. The word had been a reflex for so long that its absence felt strange at first, like removing a habit that had become structural. She stumbled sometimes, said fine, and then caught herself and corrected it. Fine is the automatic answer, she told herself. The real answer is the one that requires a second. She started giving herself the second. Cole came back to the diner 6 weeks after the Tuesday. She heard the motorcycles, first the same sound, the same advance notice, and she was at the counter refilling Gerald's coffee when the door opened and he walked in, Boomer and Silver behind him, Trace at the back. Gerald looked over his shoulder. "Your people," he said. "My people," she agreed. Cole sat in the same booth. She did not think this was accidental. She brought the coffee not in the new mug. The new mug stayed at home now, a kept thing, and set it on the table and looked at him. "Your father," he said. It wasn't quite a question. "Home 4 weeks," she said. "Good response to the medication. Cardiologist is pleased." She paused. "He wants to meet you." Cole looked at his coffee. "He doesn't have to, I know," she said. "He wants to anyway. A man who stays when he could leave, that's not nothing. That's not something you let pass without acknowledgement," she repeated. Her father's exact words back to Cole, and watched his expression do the thing it did, the brief passage of something real moving through the steadiness. "You're going to keep doing that," Cole said, saying the exactly right thing. "I'm practicing," she said. Boomer, from the counter, said, "She's good at that. 3 weeks, and she's already better at it than you," Silver told him. "I've had 22 years, Boomer said. "She's ahead of schedule." She laughed, the real kind, the one that surprised her, the involuntary kind that had been returning gradually over the past weeks as sleep accumulated and the tremor faded, and her body remembered what it felt like to operate from sufficiency rather than deficit. She went and got the coffee pot. She refilled every cup in the room, Cole's table, the counter, Gerald, the couple in booth 3, the young woman by the window, who had been coming in every morning for 2 weeks and who Maddie had noticed, with her new careful attention, always sat with her hands folded tight on the table and always ordered the smallest thing on the menu and always looked like someone running a private calculation that never came out right. She refilled the young woman's coffee. She paused. "Are you doing okay?" she said. "Not the automatic version." The young woman looked up. There was a flicker, the specific flicker of someone who has been asked a question they were not expecting and whose honest answer is different from the one they would have given on autopilot. "I'm fine," the young woman said. Maddie looked at her. She thought about Cole saying, "You're not fine. I know that too." She thought about 11 days of fine that had cost her more than she could measure and given back nothing. She set the carafe down. She sat across from the young woman. "My name is Maddie," she said. "I work here most mornings, and I recognize what fine looks like when it means something else." She paused. "You don't have to tell me anything, but I'm here if you want to." The young woman looked at her. Her hands, folded on the table, were shaking. Maddie recognized the tremor immediately. She recognized it the way you recognize something you have worn on your own body, the fine, persistent vibration of a nervous system running too long on emergency protocol. She recognized it, and she did not walk past it. The young woman's name was Claire. She was 26. She was a nurse at the county hospital, which was, Maddie reflected, one of those facts that arrives with its own particular weight, the people who hold others together, quietly falling apart themselves. She had been splitting her time between double shifts and caring for a mother with early-stage dementia. And she'd been saying fine to everyone who asked for so long that the word had lost its meaning entirely and become just a sound she made when people looked at her directly. She told Maddie this over coffee. She hadn't planned to. She had not planned to say anything at all to the waitress who had paused beside her table on a Thursday morning. But the question had been the real version. She had felt the difference, and the real question had pulled a real answer out of somewhere she had sealed shut. Maddie listened. She did not fix anything. She did not call a patient advocate or text a physician or arrange for 22 motorcycles in a parking lot. She just listened with the full present, deliberate attention that she had received on a Tuesday morning weeks ago from a man who had decided not to walk past. She listened, and then she said, "I know someone you should talk to. Her name is May. She's been where you are in more ways than one." And she picks up her phone. She pulled out her order book, tore off a clean sheet, and wrote May's number on it from memory. "Tell her Maddie sent you." Claire looked at the number. She folded it. She put it in her pocket. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet," Maddie said. She picked up the carafe and went back to her tables. At the counter, Cole was watching her. She caught his eye as she passed. He nodded once. She nodded back. And the diner continued, plates and coffee, and the kitchen bell and voices overlapping in the specific music of a room full of people living their lives in close proximity to each other, some of them carrying things nobody could see, some of them, one question, away from being able to set the weight down for a moment. All of them waiting, without knowing they were waiting, for someone to stop and ask the real version of the question rather than the automatic one. Maddie Carter had learned, on a Tuesday morning in October, that the difference between those two versions of the same question was the difference between a person who feels invisible and a person who feels found. She had learned it from a man in a leather vest who had walked into her diner as the most frightening thing in the room and had turned out to be the most paying attention thing in the room, which was, she had since concluded, the same as being the most powerful thing in the room. She had learned it from Emily. In a way, from the shape of the story, Emily's life had left behind the negative space of what a person becomes when nobody asks the real question in time. And she carried it now. Not as a burden, she had learned the difference between those, but as a practice. A daily repeatable, imperfect practice of stopping when something looked wrong and asking the thing that actually needed to be asked and sitting down in the answer, even when it was inconvenient, even when she had tables to cover and a carafe to refill and a life of her own that was still, in its quieter way, requiring attention. She carried it the way Cole carried Emily, not as grief, not as guilt, as a compass. Her father came to the diner for the first time 2 months after he came home from the hospital. He was not supposed to sit for long periods yet, and the drive tired him, and he stayed only 45 minutes. But he sat at the counter and drank the coffee. Maddie brought him 1 sugar, splash of cream, no need to say it, and he shook Gerald's hand and talked about irrigation for 20 minutes with the focused pleasure of a man who has been given back a life he thought he might lose. Cole was not there that day, but she had told Cole he was coming, and Cole had said, "Tell him I said welcome home," she told her father. Thomas Carter held his coffee cup in both hands. "Good man," he said. "Yes," she said. "You tell him that from me, I will," she said. She did. Some mornings, when the rush was quiet and the tables were covered and she had a moment to stand at the counter with her coffee, Maddie thought about the morning it started. The tray, the phone call, the sound of the pot hitting the booth, and the collective silence of a room bracing for the wrong thing. She thought about how certain everyone had been, in that first frozen second, that what was coming next would be terrible. She thought about how completely they had been wrong. A spilled cup of coffee had not ruined her life. It had cracked something open in it, something that had been sealed too long, built up around a young woman who had decided that strength meant solitude and that asking for help was the same as admitting defeat. The crack had let things in. Good things, real things. The kind that arrive in the form of strangers who pay attention and stay when they could leave and ask the question that requires an honest answer. She thought about this on ordinary mornings when the diner was quiet and her father was home, Danny was in school, and her hands were steady. And she thought, this is what remains, not the crisis, not the debt or the fear or the sleepless arithmetic. What remains is the network built in a single day from a single act of someone deciding to look. What remains is May's phone number committed to memory and Claire folding a piece of paper and putting it in her pocket. What remains is a coffee mug on a shelf at home and a letter sent and received and a man somewhere on a Montana road who carries his sister's memory not as a wound, but as a reason. What remains is Maddie Carter, standing at the counter of Silver Creek Diner on a Tuesday morning, watching the door, watching the people who come through it, watching for the chin held at a particular angle, the angle of someone refusing to let exhaustion show on their face, watching, and ready to stop, and ready to sit down, and ready to ask not the automatic version, but the real one, the one that requires a second, the one that says, I see you. I'm not walking past. That is what a cup of spilled coffee left behind. That is what one man's decision to stay made possible. And that is what Madeline Carter, 24 years old, blonde-haired, steady-handed, carries forward not as a debt to repay, but as a life to live fully, honestly, and never, not ever alone.